very good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Monday, the 21st of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
Well, live across the whole of the UK, of course, on your TV, your radio and online. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Coming up for you this morning.
Boris Johnson will lay out his plan for living with COVID later today. The PM is expected to tell the country that vaccination, testing and antiviral treatments will be relied upon to keep the country safe instead of social restrictions.
It comes as the Queen tests positive for COVID-19. The palace insists she's suffering mild cold-like symptoms and will carry on with light duties.
And a third named storm hits the UK. Storm Franklin brings more power cuts and travel disruption with flooding, prompting evacuations in parts of the UK.
Also today, President Biden has agreed in principle to a summit with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So, can war in Ukraine now be averted?
Don't forget you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us @gbnews.
So, Boris Johnson will unveil his plan for living with COVID today. The Prime Minister is set to remove all COVID restrictions from England, stating that the country is in a different world from when the pandemic first began.
Well, it comes as the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus. In a statement yesterday, Buckingham Palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms but expects to carry out light duties this week.
Well, let's talk to our reporter, Ellie Costello, who's outside Windsor Castle for us this morning. I mean, what do we know about the Queen's condition, Ellie?
Good morning, Stephen and Isabel. Well, we have heard from royal sources this morning that yesterday afternoon the Queen was watching her racehorse at Newbury Races on the television inside Windsor Castle. And we also know that she sent a congratulations message to Team GB curlers who won gold. So that is the latest that we know from royal sources about her condition. And that will be welcome news to many people who were obviously very concerned after this statement was made yesterday, confirming that the Queen had tested positive for coronavirus. She is a 95-year-old woman. She did test. She was suffering with poor health just before Christmas. She's almost 96, so this statement would have come as a shock yesterday. Let me share a little bit of that statement with you. It said that the Queen is suffering with mild cold-like symptoms, which again will be a relief that it is mild for Her Majesty, and also that she will expect to continue with light duties at Windsor Castle over the coming weeks. So it is this keep calm and carry on attitude from the Queen. It is business as usual. She very much wants to be continuing on with her work. And this is really rare, Isabel and Stephen, to hear from a royal household about the Queen's private medical matters on the day that something happens. She tested positive yesterday and we received that statement at lunchtime. So it is very rare, but I think this is all part of this keep calm and carry on attitude. They let us know that the Queen had tested positive for coronavirus, but they also said that these symptoms were mild and she would be carrying on with work. And of course, great efforts have gone to keeping the Queen safe during the pandemic. She spent most of the past 2 years here at Windsor Castle in HMS Bubble. That is the nickname that has been given to that reduced household of just 20 staff that have been surrounding the Queen for the past 2 years. And royal sources do say that many of HMS Bubble have tested positive in the past week or so, and that follows Prince Charles's positive test on the 10th of February. He met with his mother, the Queen, 2 days prior to that positive test. So it's not exactly clear that the Queen was exposed via her son, but it could have been from anybody in HMS Bubble here at Windsor Castle. We also know that the Duchess of Cornwall, Prince Charles's wife Camilla, is also self-isolating. She has tested positive for coronavirus. So this is definitely something that has been in the royal household for the past couple of weeks. So there is obviously concern for Her Majesty, but the message from the palace is the Queen is very much in the very best place and is receiving the very best care.
OK, Ellie, thank you.
Well, let's now hear from a microbiologist at the University of Aberdeen, Professor Hugh Pennington, who joins us now. Very good morning to you, Professor. Of course, anyone contracting COVID at 95 will be of concern, even if they are triple vaxxed. How heartened should we to hear that Her Majesty is only suffering mild symptoms, do you think?
Well, that's very good news. And it's actually typical of all these variants of coronavirus, particularly Omicron, that most elderly people who are most at risk of having a hard time with the virus actually only have mild symptoms. Some don't even have any symptoms at all. But of course, one just has to hope for the best. And with Her Majesty, a very speedy recovery, even from the mild symptoms she's got. But of course, the good news about the current virus that's going around, and it may well be Omicron that she's got, is that it's much milder in terms of causing serious illness than the previous variants, and so, but perhaps an explanation, and I'm only speculating here, is that Omicron is very good at getting into bubbles and all that kind of thing. So that might well be the explanation of why, despite being in a bubble for a couple of years, the virus has finally surmounted the defenses, as it were. The other good news is that apart from the fact that even people who, because of their age, are much more susceptible to having a hard time with the virus, that there are some now very good antiviral drugs which are available and which in themselves can be given early in an illness and working. There are two that are used in the UK, and they work in very different ways. So you've got a sort of double whammy against the virus. One stops the virus actually sort of completing its growth cycle by acting on a particular enzyme that the virus uses, and the other one basically affects the RNA of the virus and makes it uninfectious. So that is very good news. These are things that have only been around for a relatively short time. So that is very, very good news that really we have to have as the background. But of course, we wish Her Majesty well.
Professor, forgive me for jumping in, Professor, but in terms then of that arsenal that we've now got, all these these two impressive antivirals, the vaccines that the vast majority of us have had, is now the right time, as the Prime Minister is saying, to really cut back on all the restrictions, including when you get a positive diagnosis?
Well, my own view is that we should be still doing as much testing as is necessary. And of course, that's why we know that Her Majesty has got the virus, because the symptoms are not typical of a coronavirus. They could be caused by a whole range of other viruses, most of which are trivial. But unless you do a test, you don't know whether you've got it. So I think that's a big issue about having lateral flow tests freely available for somebody, particularly people in Her Majesty's age group and 20, 30 years younger as well, that they can get themselves tested so that they can take advantage of the antiviral drugs, because the antiviral drugs work much better if they're given earlier in the illness. If you leave it too late, they're nowhere near as good. So I think testing really is a big issue. And of course, the Prime Minister goes on about how expensive it is. But if we have lateral flow tests freely available, particularly for people at risk, which is anybody pretty well over 60, and the older you get, the more likely you are to have a hard time if you get the virus. And also all the people who've had organ transplants, who are on immunosuppression, who've got blood cancer, had blood cancers, treating all these people should I think still have access to a lateral flow test without any detriment to themselves. That's the issue that I would focus on here, because testing is the only way you know whether you've got the virus, and the sooner you test in the illness and do something, the sooner you are, the more likely you are to escape any harmful effects. The self-isolation is also a very good idea, although I think basically we haven't been doing it anywhere near as we should. I think a lot of people who are supposed to self-isolate haven't, and I suspect that's been taken into account by the Prime Minister, that if only half the people who self-isolate who's supposed to self-isolate do it, well, why make it a legal requirement? Just tell people that they should be doing it as a matter of common sense rather than as a matter of legal requirement.
And so, Professor, if, as you say, this is already happening, do you not expect to see much of a change in the outcomes in terms of the cases and the people in hospital? Do you think that this is then, despite your concerns about testing and the fact that a lot of people aren't isolating as they should, that really things might not change?
Well, that's going to be basically the big question that will be answered in the next month or two. That once we've relaxed in terms of having the regulations legally binding, what difference is that going to make to the amount of viruses buzzing around? And only time will tell. So it's a bit of a gamble. But it's a gamble being taken in the knowledge that the vaccination program in the UK has been very successful, that vaccination itself gives very good protection to the high-risk people, and we have these two antiviral drugs that seem to work quite well. So, that's the background to the whole thing. And let's hope that the gamble comes off and that the number of cases doesn't surge. And the imponderable that lurks in the background, about which nobody can do anything, is if a new variant appeared that behaved differently from Omicron, which basically, the good news about that one, if there's any good news at all, is that it is definitely a milder infection than Delta was and the previous variants.
OK, Professor Hugh Pennington, thank you very much, bacteriologist from the University of Aberdeen. We appreciate you joining us this morning.
There's an interesting headline in The Sun this morning. I'm not one to criticise the papers, but look at that, HRH to WFH. She's not HRH.
Oh, OK.
She's HM.
Her Majesty,
Her Majesty.
Of course. But it's a nice little acronym, isn't it? They're having fun there. It's wrong.
You're upsetting a few of the royalists out there today with that. People at The Sun, let me tell you, I've seen a few tweets this morning on that one.
Should we take a look at the headlines now? And the Prime Minister says scrapping the requirement to self-isolate in England will bring the country towards a return to normality and finally give people back their freedom. Boris Johnson will meet with his cabinet this morning before updating MPs on his Living with COVID blueprint. However, some health experts, as we've been hearing, have been critical of the idea of lifting the requirement to quarantine after a positive test.
Excuse me, union leaders have hit out at government plans to charge for COVID tests, calling it an act of madness during a cost of living crisis. The TUC says it will disproportionately hit frontline and low-paid workers, and is urging the Prime Minister to put public health first ahead of internal party politics.
The coming week will be crucial for democracy, according to the Prime Minister, after he spoke to the French President Emmanuel Macron about the growing tensions in Ukraine. US President Joe Biden has agreed in principle to talks with Mr. Putin as long as Russia holds off on any invasion plans. But there is growing concern over increased shelling in the region and Russia extending military drills in Belarus.
Train operators have warned passengers to stay at home if possible, as Storm Franklin is expected to bring more major disruption. Yellow weather warnings are in place for England and the east of Scotland, and the Met Office issued an amber warning for Northern Ireland. It comes 2 days after Storm Eunice caused what providers say was the biggest national power outage on record.
Australia is welcoming tourists back today after nearly 2 years. Vaccinated travellers have been greeted at Sydney's airport after some of the world's strictest pandemic measures were lifted. Some Australians were allowed to return down under last year, but most international tourists have had to wait.
I can tell you, I don't know what day of the week it is.
No, I'm not surprised. You don't normally come in on a Monday morning.
No, Monday's like a shopping day, a supermarket day for me.
Well, you can
Bit
still
of
do
washing,
that.
bit of ironing.
A little bit later on.
Oh, thanks.
So if you are watching or listening today, however you are joining us, of course, you'll probably have noticed Eamonn's not here. He's taking a holiday this week, and I've got the lovely Stephen Dixon joining me. And, of course, we've worked together many times before, years together at Sky, and I'm delighted to be working
I
with you.
thought I'd got away with it, ladies and gents, to be perfectly honest.
And we are
But
reunited.
here we are again.
Yeah,
Here
like
we are
old
again.
times.
It
It's
is
been
that.
fabulous.
We had some fun back in the day.
We did. We have
So-
lots of giggles, and we hope that you'll keep us company this week.
She's very rude in the commercial breaks, ladies and gentlemen. Very cheeky. Very rude.
And
Some of the things she says you would not believe.
I'm a very long-suffering female presenter, I have to say. All of my male counterparts are so cheeky. I have to keep them all in line. I'm going to crack the whip, but do get in touch with us this morning. Let us know your thoughts about any of the subjects that we're talking about. Tweet us, email us. We love to hear from you.
Yes, and let us know, as we've been doing over the weekend, and we love this.
Weather pics.
No, well, yes, I mean, weather pics, if you've got them, would be great, but show us where you are. Show us you watching us, because then we can see your faces and know who we're talking to, which is really nice. And where in the world you are. We get people from all over the world.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, we'll retweet the best ones. How about that? Bit of a challenge this morning. Show us where you are. And, you know, even if it's just down the road, we welcome you all. It's lovely to have you with us this morning. But, of course, look, lots of news to get through. Storm Franklin now on the horizon. Yeah,
it is the third storm to impact the UK in a week. More power cuts expected, more transport disruption and more flooding.
Now, this comes just only days after Storm Eunice killed 4 people and left a record 1.4 million homes without power, with thousands yet to be reconnected.
Now, the Met Office has issued an amber wind warning for Northern Ireland, while danger to life flood warnings have also been issued. They're in Greater Manchester, where people have been forced to leave their homes.
Well, let's go to Northern Ireland and join our reporter Doogie Beattie, who's keeping watch for us. Very good morning to you, Doogie. And you can see Amelia Harper there as well, out and about in the weather for us. Doogie, to you first of all. I know Northern Ireland is feeling the full force of Storm Franklin at the moment. How's it going?
Well, this is the third storm inside 7 days, and Northern Ireland very much got away with the first 2. I can assure you it made land here last night about midnight, and it has been quite severe. In fact, the eye of the storm has really passed us, and it's probably on its way to across the Irish Channel now. The winds are dying down slightly, so it'll give you some idea of just how bad it was. You know, the worst of these storms is yet to be felt. When you get 3 storms like this in a row, coming from the countryside, we were always taught to a gift horse never came along that often, and quite often lots of people wanted it, so we always went for the trees to cut up for the next year for our heat, because they come down. Because what happens when these storms come in, they push the trees, and then in February, in March, the heavy rains come in, and the saying about March is in like a lion or out like a lamb, or in like a lamb and out like a lion. Once that frost and ice gets into the roots of those trees, the water expands and the trees come down. So March will probably bring us a lot more power outages and everything else that goes with it because of the storms that are happening now. But Northern Ireland last night took a severe battering on the way down here. There was lots of debris on the roads. I saw quite a few electricity board vehicles on their way to whatever outages had obviously happened. It's too early in the morning just now to find out exactly what has happened, but I suspect damage will be severe.
OK, Doogie, thank you.
Yeah, that's worrying. It is worrying. Well, what about for England? Amelia's in Hertfordshire, in Hitchin, I think, aren't you, Amelia, which is pretty close to Luton airports. I mean, what are the winds like? Because Luton's going to be watching that very closely.
They will be watching that very closely. Well, I can tell you it is bitterly cold here, and the winds are only just starting to pick up. We're going to see, due to this yellow Met Office weather warning for England, we inland are going to see gusts of up to 60 miles an hour, and at coast we're going to see those reach up to 70, possibly 80 in some places. That is until about 1 o'clock or just after. Today we could see further power cuts, we could see further transport delays and also damage to buildings. I mean, here where I am in Hitchin, you can see just behind me a 100-year-old beech tree that was blown over in Storm Eunice. And of course, there are about 8,000 engineers that have been out over the last few days trying to reconnect the 1.35 million, the business secretary gave us that update last night, of people who were disconnected from the power grid. As of this morning, 58,000 10,000 people are still without power. So, of course, this is going to continue to hamper those clean-up efforts. And it's not just impacting that as well. 21 rail operators across the UK are also still experiencing delays on their line. You can just see that wind picking up here now. So I'll give it back to you before we get into any difficulties.
Yeah, stay safe, Amelia. And to you, Doogie, as well. And keep us posted on how it's going.
As you know, it was awful on the drive down today. I do about 80 miles or so to come down here from Buckinghamshire, and it was worse today than it has been over the weekend.
Well, do you know, it's the addition of the rain that's been the real problem as well for a lot of people. Obviously, we've seen people being evacuated in Greater Manchester, but last night I was putting my kids to bed and they're up in the attic of our house and they've got all those Velux windows. Yeah. Honestly, it was so loud, it was as if we were in a tropical monsoon or something. But yeah, let us know your stories. How are you getting on this morning? Hopefully you've still got your power. And as I say, do send us any pictures as well. Yes, yeah, do. Any trees down or anything like that, as long as it's all safe. We had someone send a picture of there was a near miss over the weekend. A tree missed someone's car by about an inch. Oh, my God. So if anything like that and it's safe to take the pictures, then get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. OK, stay with us after the break. Could an agreement between Putin and Biden push Russia back from the brink of war? We'll be looking at that in a moment. But first of all, here's your weather forecast. So the UK is looking gradually calmer as Storm Franklin moves away, allowing the winds to ease. Let's have a look at the details for you. And bright across southwest England by lunchtime, but still very windy with gales over the hills around the coast as well. The odd shower is possible, temperatures climbing into double figures. Showers will still be a little more frequent across southeast England and the London area, but gusty winds here will make it feel colder than the numbers suggest. Our gales around the coast and over the higher ground of Wales will slowly ease as well. Some sunshine developing, but perhaps the odd sharp shower too. It's a mixed morning for the Midlands with sunny spells and a few showers. Very windy here as Storm Franklin clears through. Temperatures climbing to around 10 Celsius by midday. Now, plenty of sunny spells for northern England, but the wind's still strong in the west. A few showers possible, but most places will stay dry. Temperatures generally staying in single figures. Scattered showers will continue across Scotland, falling as snow over the higher ground. Winds easing from the north and west, but still blustery in the east. Highs of 8 degrees in Edinburgh. And Northern Ireland will also be largely dry with some sunny spells across the province, but those gusty winds are continuing. Not as strong as they have been overnight. That's the good news. The highs there of 10 Celsius. And then it will be largely dry throughout the rest of the day across the UK, but rain moving back into the far west by evening. That's how your weather's shaping up this Monday morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Oh, it is 6:25. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel right across the UK on your TV and on your radio.
So, US President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir Putin, have agreed in principle to a summit on European security.
Now, Ukraine continues to teeter on the edge of war as Russia and Belarus conduct joint military operations just across the border. Now, Moscow has said Russian forces would remain in Belarus indefinitely.
So does diplomacy still have a chance, or is Russia set to attack Ukraine in the coming days, as US President Biden has predicted?
Well, let's talk to Samantha De Bender, an Associate Fellow at the Russia-Eurasia Programme at the Royal Institute of International Affairs at Chatham House. Really good to see you this morning. I mean, how important is it that we have this now agreement in principle, certainly from Washington, to have some sort of summit here?
Well, it's of course very important. This weekend was very, very tense because there was a key date that was yesterday, and that was February the 20th. February the 20th was the supposed end of the Russian military exercises in Belarus and in Russia. It was also the anniversary of the bloodiest day of the Maidan uprisings in 2014. And it was the end of the games in Beijing. And a lot of analysts, and myself included, were saying that if there was going to be an invasion, the 20th of February would have been a very symbolic date for it to take place. It hasn't taken place, and we now have this promise of talks. So this is, of course, a very positive development. As long as diplomacy is continuing, there's always hope. And I think Anthony Blinken said that we will continue talking until until the planes start flying across the borders. But I think it's important to put these talks into perspective. Talks have been taking place with Ukraine, Russia, and Western powers, France and Germany, since 2015. In what's called the Normandy format, which is a name that's given to these talks, underneath the aegis of what's called the Minsk Agreement, which are a series of ceasefires agreements between Ukraine and the separatist rebels in Donbass. So talks have been going on for years. And for any more talks to be effective, the format of the talks will have to be widened to have the US included, maybe even the UK, which has been notably absent from the high-level discussions here. And talks would probably have to be accompanied by an agreement for some kind of independent peacekeeping force, whether this is in a UN peacekeeping force or an OSCE peacekeeping force. The flare point here is eastern Ukraine, where you have these separatist rebels who've declared independence from Ukraine since 2014. And the real danger that we have here now would be of war starting by accident. What I mean by that is you have these separatists who are not fully controlled by Moscow, who have their own so-called army, who've called for mobilization. If some, for want of a better word, hot-headed commander decides to start provoking Ukraine, which they are doing at the moment, there is shelling taking place. If this goes too far, the Ukrainians might have no other choice but to respond.
That's exactly.
If you look at Ukraine, yeah.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask you. You know, many people, many analysts suggesting war is actually already in motion, and there's lots of provocation, certainly from the Russian separatists. And quite aside from that, there are now concerns not only of combat war, but this kind of cyber warfare that could also be happening behind the scenes as well.
Absolutely, you're right on both fronts. First of all, the war has been going on since 2014, and it has intensified in the last few days. And the cyber front, Ukraine has come under cyber attack in the last weeks. Last week and the week before, you had various ministries that were taken offline. You had big banks that were taken offline. The Ministry of Defense was under attack, and this is crucial for command and control throughout Ukraine and throughout the army. You've also got an information warfare taking place, and this is very important. Russia is peddling stories about Ukraine wanting to commit a genocide in eastern Ukraine. There are arguments and disputes over who is shelling whom and how, which is why reinforced international observers are really important so that there is no doubt who is shelling whom and when. There's a sort of information poker game going on right now between the East and the West, because you have Russia saying it's withdrawing its troops, but at the same time, satellite images are showing it's not withdrawing its troops. Ukraine and the UK are doing something very unprecedented, which is making intelligence reports public. This could be part of a desire on the West to start controlling the narrative. This is a conflict. These are negotiations that have been initiated and controlled by Russia for now. And what we're seeing here is the West basically saying we are also going to start saying what is happening and controlling the way the world is perceiving this, and not letting Putin get away with what has been covert warfare as well for the past 8 years.
It's certainly something we need to watch very closely. Samantha De Bender from Chatham House, good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, do stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're going to be looking at your newspapers today with Emily Carver and Andre Walker. See you in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Oh, it is 6:33. Very good morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Isabel. I nearly said Eamonn and Isabel.
Well, when
then.
you said when you're watching and listening, I thought you were saying Anne Diamond for a second, and I thought I was going to have to correct you. Anyway, we're all over the shop, but it's Stephen and Isabel this morning, and we are live across the UK on both your TV and your radio.
Let's have a look at the newspapers for you. We'll start with the Daily Telegraph. It says the Queen does not expect senior members of her family to change their plans as she continues with some duties despite her positive COVID test.
The Daily Mirror is reporting that the Queen's only been suffering with light symptoms.
The Eye says several other members of the Windsor Castle staff have also tested positive.
Her Royal Highness to work from home, says The Sun, much upsetting royal commentators and our Stephen Dixon. No, she is Her Madge. The paper wishes the Queen a speedy recovery.
The Daily Mail praises the Queen's determination to continue working despite catching COVID.
The Times looks into the Prime Minister's plan to live with COVID as free tests will be limited and self-isolation scrapped in England.
The Guardian has conflicting reports about Russia's intentions to invade Ukraine, with Emmanuel Macron from France announcing that President Putin is still open to negotiating with the US.
Not now, Franklin. The Daily Star looks at the 4 further storms set to batter Britain.
Ugh. Let's go through the papers then in a bit more detail with political commentator and broadcaster Andre Walker and broadcaster and columnist Emily Carver. Get there in the end. Good to see you both this morning. Andre, let's kick off with the front of the Mirror, should we?
Yeah, and it's been in most of the papers, hasn't it? The Queen testing positive for coronavirus, but deciding that she's going to soldier on. I just hope that this is going to be just an example to all of us that, you know, the Omicron variant is not as bad as Delta, and so people are able to kind of not maybe get back to work because it's still a little bit dangerous to infect people, though the self-isolation may end in the next couple of days.
Well, it's not. It's just the statutory self-isolation.
Well, yes.
The guidance is expected to say people should just, without the law prescribing it. So.
And of course, if most of us have as much infrastructure as the Queen, so we're able to work from home as well.
Well, exactly. She's only doing light duties, so, I mean, it's a few letters and
I've got to be honest with you, I had Omicron and I was a bit disappointed because obviously I had to cancel an appearance, not with you, but with Eamonn and Isabel. But I wasn't that bad, and certainly I was able to work from home. But then again, I'm not 95 years old, and I've recently left a partner.
This does obviously come in a very difficult year for the Queen. It's the last thing you'd want to hear from the palace, that she's unwell, even if it is just cold, mild symptoms. For someone at the age of 95, I mean, it's still concerning.
This is the worry, isn't it? And we're all... I mean, obviously, the Queen is planning for end of life because she's made the comments about Prince Charles and Camilla and all. She's planning the succession. She's getting that in place. And so when there is any sort of health scare like this, we are going to be worried, aren't we?
Yeah, but it does seem like the majority of the public and the media are all behind her, hoping she gets well soon. So hopefully she'll soldier on and continue. But, you know, fingers crossed.
And I'm amused at everyone thinking that several hours of reading state papers constitutes light duties. I mean, even with a mild cold, that sounds like quite hard work, I think, going through all hours and hours of papers. And I think she's already sent well wishes, hasn't she, to the curling winners from the Olympics. So, you know, she's a tough cookie, and you know, we shouldn't underestimate her. But, of course, she's had a difficult... You mentioned, of course, a difficult year, Prince Philip dying, of course, being the key. But, you know, her son's as well causing a bit of a headache in recent weeks.
Yeah, if she'd come into contact with Prince Andrew, she'd be radioactive by now, rather positive for coronavirus. But no, on a serious note, this is pretty horrendous, and it is incredibly worrying because we've got you know, this investigation into the Prince's Foundation that's ongoing, the Cash for Honours thing. So obviously there's going to be a point where we hand over to the next generation, but the next generation are looking fairly discredited, and so there is a constitutional issue with her and the end of her life. And certainly, I mean, as anybody who's got elderly relatives will know, anybody who's 95 years old, any health scare is a major health scare, whatever they say. And, of course, people can go incredibly quickly at that age.
We should stress Prince Charles only being asked as a witness in that investigation.
Yes.
Cash for Honours, yeah.
Yes. To the Times, Emily, and looking at the changing COVID rules we're expecting this week.
Yes, this is an exciting story for those of us who were looking forward to all restrictions going. There are some controversial announcements that the Prime Minister is set to make. The one is that he's going to scrap the legal requirement to self-isolate after testing positive. There's been a little bit of a backlash over that one because people are concerned that it's too early to do so. But then, of course, we know now that free lateral flow tests are costing taxpayers £2 billion a month, and that's another move that the government is expected to make to stop those free lateral flow tests. So again, there's been an outpouring of concern over that. But I think looking at the broader picture, I think this is the right move and at the right time from the Prime Minister. Of course, the Times are saying that he's proud of this. Whether he deserves to be proud of it or not, I'm not sure.
No, I don't know there's anything to be proud about particularly, but it is about moving forward, isn't it? I mean, it's like if you have a really bad cold or flu or whatever else and you need to be off work, then fine. But we don't need legal restrictions to tell us to do it, do we?
Yeah, we need to go back to how we used to deal with cold, flu-like symptoms and stay at home if you're feeling unwell.
Andre, you'll have an opinion on this. I mean, Labour have come out saying this is like declaring victory before the war is over.
Yeah, my concern is with all of these things that there's a lot of people now, whether it be the Chris Whitties of this world, Van Tam when he was around, or Keir Starmer, it just feels to me like these restrictions are now part of the weaponry that we use in any public health crisis. And every time there's any sort of outbreak of anything, we're just going to return to this whole idea of lockdowns and leaving people at home. I think most people are completely responsible now, except it is easier for you to self-isolate if you live in a big house in the countryside than perhaps if you live in shared accommodation in central London. So I do accept that, and there had to be some moves to step in. But I really think that this idea that this is the new normal we keep hearing, I think is wholly unacceptable.
Yeah. No, it's a very fair point, I think.
Let's turn our attention to The Guardian now, and of course, incredibly serious situation continuing over in Ukraine. What's their take this morning?
Yeah, it was so serious that I agreed to read The Guardian, right? Which was, my face began to melt as I looked at it.
But actually, what we should point out is the reason we're choosing this paper is because it's the only paper of all the broadsheets and the tabloids that is covering this on their front page this morning.
Yes, and I think you were right to point out that it talks about the fact that there is a degree of confusion about what's going on. Now, Vladimir Putin, of course, is famously dishonest. He's famed for his misinformation campaigns where he'll deny things, obfuscate and use his security services to lie. But he is telling Emmanuel Macron that there is an opportunity for peace. He's saying that there will be negotiations and there's potential for doing all sorts of face-to-face meetings and all sorts. And then, of course, our intelligence services are saying, or the American intelligence services are saying that he's already instructed his guys to commence with the invasion. So it's just a very confused picture. But the problem is, when you are talking about Vladimir Putin, he's a schoolyard bully. He's just somebody who will deliberately waste time and obfuscate in this manner. And I just worry that he, like every time, because we are so weak, he's going to get away with whatever it is he wants.
But isn't there a problem here in that, I mean, when we talk to experts and former ambassadors and other people who really know this inside out, say part of the problem here is the West has not listened to Russia's concerns over the years. Now, they might not be going about it in the right way, but they still have genuine security concerns.
Yeah, well, and that's fair enough. But imagine you'd been under the jackboot of the Kremlin during the Soviet Union, where there was a famine in the Ukraine that destroyed the country, where the poverty that was reaped upon these people was unbelievable. You know, the reason that Ukraine does not want to be part of Russia is because they can't stand the Kremlin.
But it's not about being part of Russia, this particularly. It's about NATO, Ukraine being part of NATO.
But there's no prospect of Ukraine being part of NATO. Plus, the other thing is,
if that's the case, why don't they make that clear, which would then remove a lot of Putin's arguments?
Well, I'm not sure we haven't, but we should do. If we haven't, then I accept that.
But I think you've got to also be careful of drawing a moral equivalence between NATO and Russia, or the Western leaders and Russia. We've seen Russian spokespeople on broadcast over the weekend just lying, blatantly lying, saying there's no escalation, and there they are, you know, with nuclear drills and all sorts at the border. So, I mean, I don't think we can take anything that Russia says as fact, and whether they say it's about NATO expansionism, do we actually know that that's the case, or is it simply that they're acting as aggressors as they have done?
But then we've also had President Biden saying, an attack is imminent. There was all the talk about last Wednesday, and then over the weekend he's been saying it's imminent. Boris Johnson saying it's going to be the worst bloodshed since 1945. It's very odd rhetoric to be throwing about at a time of high tension.
And crucially, it hasn't happened yet. And we were told that it would have happened by now, or that was what all the intelligence was saying it was supposed to happen. What was it, last Wednesday? Or the
well, yes, but now the US intelligence is actually saying that the order has now been given, and that's the latest that was being reported overnight. But look, now this summit has been agreed in principle between President Biden and President Putin. Perhaps it may not happen. Fingers crossed.
But can I just say to you that I think one of the big concerns, and I know loads of people have said it, but it's worth repeating the point. The big concern is that everybody's going to be watching what happens in Ukraine. If Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine, and he gets away with it, there is a real risk that Taiwan is next and the Chinese will invade there. And that is effectively the breaking of Western power. This idea that we have of liberalism, democracy, free trade, capitalism, you know, all of these are being smashed by the two great illiberal forces in the world, China and Russia.
Well, we'll watch it very closely, but so far, nothing. But let's keep our fingers crossed for some sort of resolution here. What we can't keep our fingers crossed about is the weather at the moment, because we've got Franklin now, we've got Gladys Herman and Imani on the way, Emily.
Yes, so some more bad news, but closer to home. Apparently, we're going to expect 4 new storms over the next few days, which is something to look forward to. But there was one thing that the Star was reporting, that apparently the gales are helping to cut UK energy bills, and that's due to the wind turbines spinning more than they normally would. Right. And 43% of Britain's electricity during Storm Eunice on Friday was generated by wind turbines. Although I did read elsewhere that some wind turbines had actually collapsed by the force of the wind, so a mixed bag.
But hang on a minute, the reason the price might go down is the lack of demand, because everybody's been cut off.
Yeah.
That's so true, yeah.
Supply and demand economics.
Pesky jet stream. All right, well, listen, Emily Carver, Andre Walker, thank you very much. We'll see more from you at around 7:30. But for now, we're going to turn our attention to something different.
Oh, yes. Now, the beautiful thing about exercise, apparently, is that when you do it regularly, you can get into a good rhythm, making it easier to work out.
Take note. But for those recovering from COVID, contracting the virus has meant many of them have found it difficult to get back to the gym.
Well, to help us get back on the post-COVID treadmill, fitness educator Delvin Clark joins us. Delvin, good morning. I mean, we all know, once you've been off a workout for a period of time, it is very hard to get that motivation back,
even if it's 20 years.
Well, exercise, everybody should have an exercise regime within their life. Even after COVID now, a lot of people are still recovering from that mental trauma of what happened, and people have their own opinions about that. But I personally think everybody should have fitness as part of their lifestyle every single day.
What do we mean by fitness, though? Because I think what puts a lot of people off is like going back to the gym or going to a gym in the first place. Do we need to sort of move away from that mindset and just think, well, it's about sort of aerobic activity wherever you do it?
I mean, to be quite honest, I think it's more about you just getting out of your house, walking, maybe jogging, enjoying some free time with some friends, and get them involved as well, because fitness is a very social thing. The gym isn't the only place you can work out. You can work out with your friends in the park, going for a walk, as I said, and gyms are helpful, and some of them are quite expensive, but I will always say just make fitness part of your natural lifestyle. So going out of the house, walking the dog, walking with friends, that too is very important as far as fitness is concerned.
You know, I've always, not laughed at, but I've always sort of found it quite funny that people jump in their cars, drive to the gym and then sit on a bicycle machine. And I've often thought, you don't need to pay all that money. You could just either hop on your bike or go for a run, because exercise can be free. So, I mean, it's available to all, whether it's running up and down the stairs inside your house, doing a few sit-ups or skipping in the garden. People shouldn't be deterred by the big price tags of some of the big expensive gyms.
That's right. Well, you know, the gyms themselves, they're more of a social element. I mean, the mental side of fitness is you going out, seeing friends, sitting down, drinking coffee, or just training next to them in the gym. So it isn't just about going there to exercise. It's more of a mental thing, seeing friends and being social. So that part of fitness is very important as well. I mean, walking the dog, walking with your friends in the park, that too is obviously important. But the gym element, you're meeting people you don't see every day, and it's away from your normal habitat. So for me, gyms are helpful in that way, as well as their fitness exercises.
I mean, it seems a bit strange to say in a way, Delvin, but I mean, one of the problems with gyms is that they're full of people who look great. And if you don't look great and you're trying to make yourself healthier, that can be very off-putting.
Yes, it can. I mean, for some people, they're underweight or overweight. They do feel sometimes intimidated by people who do exercise almost every day. But don't let that be a problem. I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere. So hopefully, in people's now mindset, they won't feel intimidated or too embarrassed about how they look going to a gym, because really and truly, that's the place really where you want to get fit. That's the real place, because you meet other people who are trying to do the same as you, and sometimes how you look is very, very important, yes, but mentally is more important. So for me, just going to the gym, being in that environment helps a lot. So the intimidation factor doesn't come in as much when you do it frequently.
And Delvin, you know, the pandemic really shone a light on the importance and I suppose the link between health and fitness. You know, we were really badly affected in the early stages compared to many other Western countries because we have such a high obesity rate in this country. In fact, the Prime Minister, after he was ill, came out, didn't he? And he said it was going to be a big priority, was to try and encourage people to make sure they got their exercise. Do you think that message has got lost along the way? Do we need to remember how absolutely key it is to be fit, to stave off things like viruses?
Well, to be quite honest, I think a lot of people now, after Christmas, obviously what's happened, I think they've now realised how important fitness is. It depends on what kind of social element that you're in yourself. The people I'm hanging out with or people I speak to, they all realise how important fitness is. And so do my participants in my classes. My daughter and I, we're teaching now at a fitness centre, and our classes are very, very popular. And so it depends on what kind of social circles you're in. But I do feel a lot of people now are realising how important fitness is in their lives now, regardless of what happened through the pandemic.
OK, Delvin Clark, thank you very much. Good to talk to you this morning. Hope that's given you some inspo, Stephen.
So everyone says I'm really unfit. Do I look really unfit?
You look amazing.
Oh, thank you.
But I know you haven't done a workout in a long time.
I do lots of walking, though.
Yeah, I think that's
20 miles a
important.
week.
Yeah, no, that's great. So do you have a Fitbit? Do you know your steps and things?
No, it does it all on my watch thing.
Right, yeah. So you're basically tracking what you're doing. So you're fine, just as long as you're moving. I think that's the key, isn't it?
I move a lot.
Keep moving, yeah.
I move a lot.
I need to do more.
Up and down on these stools. Now, well, not moving house, though. I'll tell you that. The average price tag on a home has risen across Britain by nearly £8,000 in just a month.
Yeah, the jump in February is the biggest month-on-month increase in cash terms in more than 20 years.
Well, let's talk to estate agency owner Jeremy Leaf, who joins us. Good to see you.
Morning, Stephen.
What's going on?
It's gone a bit crazy out there. It's much busier than we thought it would be, and yeah, much higher prices than we thought. But these are asking prices; they're not selling prices, so it's maybe hiding a bit more.
So is that to be expected then, I suppose, as a consequence of inflation? We're just seeing prices rise generally and house prices are no different? Because I thought house prices might reflect the fact that everyone's feeling the squeeze at the moment.
Yeah, well, there's always lots of things going on. You know, a lot of it is when we were all cooped up in lockdown, people realised they weren't in suitable properties or relationships, or both perhaps. And that prompted a lot of need to move. Working from home, looking for more space, outside particularly. And that gradually manifest itself in high prices and more activity.
The problem is, whenever we talk about house prices, we're split down the middle. I can hear half the people out there going, oh, brilliant, they've gone up £8,000 in a month. And I'm like that, oh, fantastic. Great, that's money in the bank. But of course, if you're trying to get on the housing ladder, it's a whole different scenario.
Absolutely, and it's first-time buyers who are the lifeblood of the market. They're the people we really need. They trade up, they don't stay at the bottom like maybe some of the investors, and they're very good for the whole market. That's what we really need to encourage. But there are some encouraging signs, actually, of more balance and more properties coming on the market, so hopefully prices will balance out a bit.
And of course, as house prices go up, it isn't actually more money in the bank, is it? Because ultimately, if you were to sell, you'd be buying something else more expensive, and it's all just kind of imaginary numbers in a way.
No, but you plan for the long term, that you plan for retirement and downsizing, don't you?
Absolutely. Well, a lot of people looking for more space, they're moving out to slightly less expensive areas, and then sometimes they can generate extra cash for other things.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's me told then.
It's because I'm heftily planning away for retirement, you see. So I'm thinking, well, money in the house means at some point.
Your 60th's coming up, isn't it?
Faster than you might think, Jeremy. Faster than you might think.
We spoke just a few days ago and we were just talking about the pent-up demand. There's so much demand still, and yet such a small amount of supply. And I know this because we are looking to buy a house this year and we just can't find anywhere to move to. And there's just a lack of options.
Well, that's one of the reasons, behind this fueling of demand, or the resurgence of demand which we've seen in these figures, is that people who were trying to buy last year, trying to take advantage of the stamp duty holiday, they just missed out. You know, there were sometimes 9 or 10 or more people going for the same property. So what did? They had to rent, but they made themselves. It's quite interesting. What we're finding on the ground is a lot of people who missed out before are absolutely determined to move now. So they're renting, making sure they're proceedable and able to take advantage if something comes available.
Part of the problem with rent, though, if you sort of see it as a stopgap, is the rent prices are going through the roof as well.
That's another factor. That's another factor. And in fact, the easing of the lockdown restrictions has actually, although bringing sometimes more properties on the market, and the travel restrictions as well, bringing more people here, allowing people to go away more, so not so fixated on perhaps living in outside town. That's making it more difficult for those first-time buyers.
But you are absolutely right about, people in some cases wouldn't even let us view a property unless we were proceedable, which meant we had an offer. We weren't even on the market at the time. But we couldn't move into rent, and lots of people are saying this because you have a mortgage. And what do you do with your mortgage if you then go into rental accommodation?
It doesn't suit everybody, but as you say, people are trying to get themselves in a position. So when something does come available, and there is more coming on the market, that's the good news, that they are in a position to go ahead and not miss out and waste money. That's the biggest issue.
It's brutal out there.
What's the mortgage market like at the moment? Because some of the fixed-term deals are better than I expected when I was looking the other day. Is that making it a slightly brighter option for those first-time buyers? Is there a bit of hope on the horizon?
There is a little bit of hope, but the interest rates are going up, and for first-time buyers in particular, because they're restrained by expenses and their costs perhaps more than people who've been in properties for a long time, those are the ones that really feel it when the interest rates go up. So although there's good deals available, the threat of further interest rate increases is making them nervous about taking on debt.
It's always scary, but the housing market at the moment, it is bonkers. I don't know how you do it. Lovely to see you, Jeremy. Thanks for coming in.
Great to see you again.
If you're affected by that, if you're looking for that first-time property, or indeed if you're heading towards more the retirement age and thinking of cashing in, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
OK, with the time at 6:55, we're going to take a quick break. Plenty more stories for you coming up at 7 o'clock, including Life Beyond COVID. But first of all, here's your Monday forecast.
So the UK is looking gradually calmer as Storm Franklin moves away, allowing the winds to ease. Let's have a look at the details for you. And bright across southwest England by lunchtime, but still very windy with gales over the hills around the coast as well. The odd shower is possible, temperatures climbing into double figures.
Showers will still be a little more frequent across southeast England and the London area, but gusty winds here will make it feel colder than the numbers suggest.
Our gales around the coast and over the higher ground of Wales will slowly ease as well. Some sunshine developing, but perhaps the odd sharp shower too.
It's a mixed morning for the Midlands with sunny spells and a few showers. Very windy here as Storm Franklin clears through. Temperatures climbing to around 10 Celsius by midday.
Now, plenty of sunny spells for northern England, but the wind's still strong in the west. A few showers possible, but most places will stay dry. Temperatures generally staying in single figures.
Scattered showers will continue across Scotland, falling as snow over the higher ground. Winds easing from the north and west, but still blustery in the east. Highs of 8 degrees in Edinburgh.
And Northern Ireland will also be largely dry with some sunny spells across the province, but those gusty winds are continuing. Not as strong as they have been overnight. That's the good news. The highs there of 10 Celsius.
And then it will be largely dry throughout the rest of the day across the UK, but rain moving back into the far west by evening. That's how your weather's shaping up this Monday morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Morning to you. It's very nearly 7 o'clock on Monday, the 21st of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
We are live across the whole of the UK on your TV and on your radio and online. So wherever you are, you can take us with you. Coming up this morning.
Boris Johnson will lay out his plan for living with COVID later on. The PM is expected to tell us that vaccination, testing and antiviral treatments will be relied upon to keep the country safe.
It comes as the Queen tests positive for coronavirus. She's expected to experience mild cold symptoms, but is carrying out light duties.
And a third named storm hits the UK. It's Storm Franklin, bringing more power cuts, more travel disruptions and flooding as well, prompting evacuations in some parts of the UK.
Also today, the US President Joe Biden has agreed in principle to a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So we're asking, can war in Ukraine be averted?
Don't forget, we want to hear from you about anything you want to talk about this morning, including just where you are, what you're doing as you're watching or listening to us today. GBviews at gbnews.uk or send us a tweet at GBnews.
So our top story this morning, Boris Johnson is set to unveil his plan for living with COVID today. The Prime Minister is set to remove all COVID restrictions from England, stating that the country is in a different world from when the pandemic started.
Now, it comes as the Queen has tested positive for COVID. In a statement yesterday, the palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms but expects to carry on with light duties this week.
Well, our reporter Ellie Costello is outside Windsor Castle for an update for us. Ellie, just give us an insight, if you can, on how Her Majesty is coping.
Well, good morning, Isabel and Stephen. And the sun has just come up on Windsor Castle, and we know that the Queen is inside those castle walls somewhere recovering from coronavirus. And royal sources have told us that yesterday she was cheering on her horse at the Newbury races. She was watching it on television inside Windsor Castle. And we also know that she sent a message to Team GB, who won gold in the curling yesterday. She sent a congratulations message to them as well. So those two things will bring a lot of hope to people that were very shocked by the statement from Buckingham Palace yesterday, and we're very concerned to hear that our 95-year-old monarch has tested positive for coronavirus, but that is at least hopeful that she isn't suffering too badly with coronavirus. So let's take a little look at that statement now. Hopefully it's up on your screens for you. It says that the Queen is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but she will continue light duties at Windsor Castle over the coming week. It adds that she will continue to receive medical attention and will follow all of the appropriate guidelines. And Isabel and Stephen, this is really rare in terms of a statement from the palace. Usually we don't receive something on the day that something happens with the Queen's private medical business. She actually only tested positive yesterday, and we had a statement by lunchtime, but I think this is all very intentional. It's a very keep calm and carry on statement from Buckingham Palace that wanted to let us know the details of the Queen's health, but also assure us that she was doing okay and continuing with work. And indeed, great efforts have gone into keeping the Queen safe throughout the pandemic. That image of the Queen sat by herself at her own husband's funeral has become this image of the pandemic, and all about self-sacrifice and keeping yourself safe. And the Queen has spent a lot of the last 2 years in Windsor Castle in the safety of HMS Bubble, and that is the nickname that was given to the just 20 staff that have been surrounding the Queen throughout this time. But royal sources have told me that the Queen always knew that she would contract coronavirus at some point, and so many of HMS Bubble have tested positive in the past week. Prince Charles, the Queen's son, the heir to the throne, he tested positive on the 10th of February, and his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, she is still self-isolating after testing positive. So it's not quite clear that the Queen did actually contract COVID from her son, but many people in the Windsor bubble have tested positive in the past few weeks, so it has certainly been in circulation in the palace. So of course there is concern for this 95-year-old monarch. She did have poor health before Christmas, but we do know that she had her first vaccination in January 2021, and it has never been denied by the palace that she is triple vaccinated. So one would hope that that would prevent her being hospitalised or her condition deteriorating as well. And there is this emphasis on this back to business and business as usual. The Queen being at her desk yesterday congratulating those Olympians. So the Queen's personal doctor is called Sir Hugh Thomas, and he is in charge of her care, and the palace very much want us to know that she is in the best possible place, she's receiving the best possible care, and the palace are very much looking forward to the Jubilee celebrations, the official Jubilee celebrations in June.
OK, Ellie, thank you. Let's talk now to Professor of Microbiology at the University of Reading, Simon Clark. Simon, good to see you this morning. Obviously,
morning,
I mean, away from the Queen specifically, I mean, there's always going to be a concern, isn't there, from anyone of an older age, and particularly a very old age like Her Majesty, when they contract COVID, even though they may well be triple vaccinated.
Yes, I think it's highly likely that the Queen has been fully vaccinated and boosted, so that gives her really good chance of really riding this through with nothing more than minor symptoms. But it needs to be remembered that even before we had the vaccine, somebody of her age really probably only or would have likely got through it anyway without being any more than feeling a bit groggy. You know, there's this perception around that I think that elderly people, it was the end for them. That's not true. Most of them survived. That was before the vaccine.
OK, the timing of this really interesting as well. The news breaking yesterday afternoon about Her Majesty the Queen contracting the virus, the first time since the pandemic began. And today we're hearing the Prime Minister will be setting out his details of how to live with COVID. Can we expect things like this to be happening more and more then? Perhaps some of our elderly relatives contracting the virus for the first time?
Well, I think if people don't have to test or don't test and don't have to isolate when they know they're infected, then that just means that there's going to be more infection in society, and more people are going to get infected. And some of them, yes, inevitably will be the older generation.
It's interesting, there were some details out yesterday being reported that I saw that said, despite the huge number of infections that we saw over the winter months, the death rate in the UK was still sort of in line with what you would normally see. So, I mean, is that a clear scientific indication that actually we really are through the worst of this, and we do now have to, as the Prime Minister is saying, learn to live with it?
Oh, I think, yeah, we are absolutely through the worst of this, but there's still a lot of it circulating around the world. There's still a lot of capacity to kill people. I think that the numbers of flu this winter have been low. It's not been particularly cold, so we would expect the number of excess deaths to be lower than it would be on average because of that. I'm not altogether convinced that we should be filling in that gap with COVID deaths, which is the logical conclusion to draw from that. We should be trying to drive those numbers down as well. If we've got a good year for excess deaths, if I can say that means they're low, then we should keep them low. We shouldn't allow COVID to make up that difference.
Forgive me then, but how do we go about doing that without sticking within some sort of restrictions in the long term?
Well, it depends what you mean about restrictions. I think that it's perfectly reasonable and desirable for us to get back to living our lives as much as we can. But I fear that there's a drawing back of the surveillance, sort of taking the batteries out of the smoke detector because you don't like the noise going on here. That, I think, is the mistake. Not letting us get back to doing the things we were doing 2 years ago. That's perfectly reasonable in my book.
Prime Minister has cautioned, hasn't he, that people shouldn't throw caution to the wind, and there is obviously going to be lots of guidance replacing the mandatory rules that are being stripped away, so people will still be encouraged, for example, to isolate after a positive test. I just want to ask you, and I suppose it relates to Her Majesty the Queen as well, whether you think that, really we're so lucky to be in this position where we have a whole weaponry now. We've got not just the vaccinations and the testing, we've also got these antivirals to prevent people going into hospital. One presumes the Queen is being offered those.
Quite possibly, yes. I mean, that's science for you. That's why we do this. We don't do science just to bring people bad news and be portents of doom, although it's probably seemed that way over the past couple of years. But the pace of development here, because the crisis has been so bad and the demand has been so strong, means that we've got these drugs, many of which were adapted from other projects, as were the vaccines. And that they've come on stream quicker than we would normally have expected, but I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah. OK, it's really interesting to talk to you, Simon. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this morning. Ed, I mean, what do you make of the whole removal of restrictions? I mean, are you looking forward to sort of going back to more of a normal, or are you worried?
I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make to my life, really. I think I'll continue to test. I've got quite a few tests in storage that I haven't got through yet, so they'll, be available to me. I think the big worry is if there is a new variant that we don't know much about, people will be concerned about whether or not we're keeping on top of it. But I think, generally, we're ready, aren't we? We're seeing it spreading and people aren't going into hospital in the same way.
I mean, it's interesting about a new variant. Stuart's been in touch. Morning to you, Stuart, who says it seems the announcement will be that restrictions are lifted but not scrapped. Why are the emergency laws not repealed in their entirety? Well, I guess because if there is then some new nasty variant which is causing a lot of concern, it's easier to bring those restrictions back in place. Now, clearly, Simon, you're not happy at that. But, that may be what we need to do at some point. But I think a lot of people are just now ready to move on.
Yeah, well, whether or not the virus is, that's the other thing. Kimmy says, carry on living as we always have. I've never lived any other way. Of course, when you're spending government spending taxpayers' money to the tune of $2 billion a month on free lateral flow tests, and we're all feeling the squeeze, then perhaps it is time to rein that in.
Maybe just limit it to those people who are more at risk, and the older generation in particular. I've got to say good morning to Joe, who's been in touch. Joe, it's really good to have you with us this morning. I don't know if you're watching on the TV or listening on the radio, but people like you, who we're here for. Joe says, I recently lost my wife of 29 years, but watching you both this morning gave me a smile.
Oh, Joe.
And that's what we're about. And you're not alone, Joe. It must be an awful time for you. I'm so sorry. But, you're not alone, and we are here to keep you company and to bring you up to date and let you know what's going on.
Yeah, we're so sorry for your loss, Joe. That's nearly 3 decades. That must be really hard, and we're honoured to have your company this morning.
Yeah, we are. We are indeed. Honoured to have all of your companies this morning. Get in touch, let us know where you are. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines.
The time is 7:12. The Prime Minister says scrapping the requirement to self-isolate in England will bring the country towards a return to normality and finally give people their freedom back. Boris Johnson will meet with his cabinet this morning before updating MPs on his living with COVID blueprint. However, some health experts have been critical of the idea of lifting the requirement to quarantine after a positive result.
Union leaders have hit out at possible government plans to charge for COVID tests, calling it an act of madness during a cost of living crisis. The TUC says it will disproportionately hit frontline and low-paid workers, and it's urging the Prime Minister to put public health first ahead of internal party politics.
Train operators have warned passengers to stay at home if possible, as Storm Franklin is expected to bring major disruption. Yellow weather warnings are in place for England and the east of Scotland, and the Met Office has issued a higher amber warning for Northern Ireland. Environment agencies have also issued hundreds of alerts for flooding across the UK.
President Biden has agreed in principle to talks with President Putin as long as Russia holds off any invasion plans of Ukraine. The coming week will be crucial for democracy, according to the Prime Minister, after he spoke to the French President Emmanuel Macron about the growing tensions. But there is growing concern over increased shelling in the region and Russia extending military drills in Belarus.
Australia has welcomed tourists back today after nearly 2 years. Vaccinated travellers have been greeted at Sydney's airport after some of the world's strictest pandemic measures were lifted. Some Australians were allowed to return down under last year, but most international tourists have had to wait.
Have you ever been down under?
I've never, no.
No, me neither.
My best friend, though, moved to Perth just before the pandemic with my goddaughter and her 2 other daughters. And I've been despairing that I'm never going to see them again. So it's back on the cards and it's very exciting.
I'd love to go.
Me too.
The only problem with it is that you need to go for, what, a month?
Yes.
Or something to make it worth the trip.
I'll tell you what, you're planning for your retirement, it sounds like. It's a retirement trip.
It'd be a retirement plan. Is it wrong to be... You know, you spend your whole life sort of trying to build a career or get up the greasy pole or whatever, you know, whatever you do, whatever job you're in. And then you sort of approach 50 and you think, oh, retirement sounds good. Is that normal? I don't know.
It's just these early starts. They're exhausting, aren't they? Look, on the issue of Australia, we're going to talk to Simon Calder a little bit later on this hour. He was on one of the first flights out of the UK to arrive in Sydney, and he is in Sydney now. So stay with us for that. He's one of the first Brits to arrive, non-Australian citizens, to arrive in the country for 2 years.
Yeah, mind you, if you're getting on a plane, Peter's been in touch. Morning, Peter. Flew into Stansted last night from Poland, circled overhead for an hour trying to land, really thought we'd flip over. The pilot did an amazing job. That must have been scary.
Oh, that is scary. Well, and you might have noticed Eamonn Holmes isn't here this morning. He's off this week. He's having a half-term break, and he was at the airport delayed for something like 4 or 5 hours yesterday evening, waiting to get away. So we've all been feeling it. It's blowy out there. To say the least. In fact, in Northern Ireland, there is an amber weather warning issued by the Met Office. Threat to life among the concerns there. Let's bring in our Northern Ireland reporter, Dookie Beattie. He's been keeping watch for us. Dookie, the sun's come up since we last spoke to you. Are you able to get a clearer assessment of how it's going, what the damage is?
Well, the damage outside of Donaghadee, and welcome to Donaghadee. This is on the Ards Peninsula in the east of the province. Now, on the way down here this morning, there was quite a lot of debris about the roads. The electricity board was moving some of their emergency vehicles out towards Killylade direction, so I would imagine there's power outages there. The wind here is very, very strong. It made land this morning at about just after midnight. 3 o'clock in the morning, it was especially ferocious, the winds. I listened to them as I was getting ready to come to work. This is the third storm inside 7 days. Now, we got away with the first 2. We definitely aren't getting away with this one. And Scotland just lies about 15 miles behind me here, so no doubt that storm is on its way there. The way a storm works, I'm sure you know, is it goes, the first comes in, the eye of the storm, it goes quiet, and then we get the tail. And I think this is pretty much the tail of the storm we're getting now. But as I was saying earlier on, all these storms that have come so quickly will cause problems to the roots of trees especially. They'll move those trees, the water will go in underneath them, so come March when the snow and the ice comes, that will freeze and expand the water, and then we'll see a lot of trees down, and expect power lines coming down in March for damage that is done right now. But at this moment in time, Northern Ireland has took a battering this morning, and it continues to do so. I would say gusts of up to about 70 miles an hour in parts.
OK, Doogie, thank you. Let's talk to... Have we got Amelia? Someone tell me?
I believe we do
have
have
Amelia.
Amelia.
There she is. Oh, Amelia, good to see you. I know the weather's been playing havoc with trying to get a signal back to us here. She's in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. What's the situation like there?
Well, exactly. You wouldn't think in Hitchin in Hertfordshire we'd have problems like you just described, but there we go. That's what the weather does, because here in England we are amongst that yellow weather warning from the Met Office for wind. That's until about 1 o'clock today. We could see further transport delays, damage to buildings and further damage to power lines. In places like where I am, inland in Hertfordshire, we're seeing gusts of wind up to 60 miles an hour. In coastal areas, we're seeing those up to 70. And of course, as Doogie was saying, this is the third named storm in a week. We had Dudley, Eunice, and now, of course, Franklin. And if we just take a little look over here, this is actually a century-old beech tree that was blown over. You can see just how thick the trunk is there. And for that to be blown over in the last few days, that's quite a mighty storm that's come in. And of course, that is going to be, the storm Franklin is going to be hampering efforts to clear up from storm Eunice at the moment. 8,000 engineers are out across the country in different parts trying to reconnect the 1.35 million people that needed reconnecting over the last few days. And even today we had 55,000 people that are still without power. And it's not just power that's having problems. 23 now rail network operators are also having difficulties across the lines.
OK, Amelia in Hertfordshire and Doogie in Northern Ireland, thank you both very much indeed.
Oh, stay warm.
Yeah,
stay
it's
warm.
blowy and
That's the Amelia's got a big coat on.
I know. Look, after the break, we're going to be taking a look at today's big sports headlines. Paul Coit will be joining us, but first of all, here's your all-important forecast.
So the UK is looking gradually calmer as Storm Franklin moves away, allowing the winds to ease. Let's have a look at the details for you. And bright across southwest England by lunchtime, but still very windy with gales over the hills around the coast as well. The odd shower is possible, temperatures climbing into double figures.
Showers will still be a little more frequent across southeast England and the London area, but gusty winds here will make it feel colder than the numbers suggest.
Our gales around the coast and over the higher ground of Wales will slowly ease as well. Some sunshine developing, but perhaps the odd sharp shower too.
It's a mixed morning for the Midlands with sunny spells and a few showers. Very windy here as Storm Franklin clears through. Temperatures climbing to around 10 Celsius by midday.
Now, plenty of sunny spells for northern England, but the wind's still strong in the west. A few showers possible, but most places will stay dry. Temperatures generally staying in single figures.
Scattered showers will continue across Scotland, falling as snow over the higher ground. Winds easing from the north and west, but still blustery in the east. Highs of 8 degrees in Edinburgh.
And Northern Ireland will also be largely dry with some sunny spells across the province, but those gusty winds are continuing. Not as strong as they have been overnight. That's the good news. The highs there of 10 Celsius.
And then it will be largely dry throughout the rest of the day across the UK, but rain moving back into the far west by evening. That's how your weather's shaping up this Monday morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
At 7:24, we're getting some interesting emails.
Yeah.
Kate, good morning, Kate, says, you made my Monday morning. Lovely to see you both. Proper professionalism. No, I thought not a chance. Not a chance.
Talking about Stephen?
That's what you I was thinking
really?
of.
Yeah,
Honestly, she's about as professional as a chocolate teapot, this one. But
Demonstrated right there. We've got, actually, this is a serious email just in from Stephen Joinson in Liverpool. He says, Storm Franklin is absolutely terrible. My bathroom windows have just blown in. I've never experienced gusts like this before. Eunice was a pussycat up here compared to this. Steve, we hope you're all right. Thanks for emailing in, and do let us know how you get on if you're also being affected by the storm at the moment.
That's grim, because the weather's still bad. It's even harder to get people around to do the work to fix things up again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Look, let's catch up with the latest sport for you this morning. Paul Coit is here. Good morning.
I've had an email as well. Who's the handsome 25-year-old doing the sport? Can he do more? I mean, that was lovely. I mean, what are the chances as well? Although it doesn't say professional on there, unfortunately.
No.
We can keep trying.
I should think that. What's going on with the football this morning?
Football, we'll probably talk about Manchester United. Manchester United beat Leeds. I mean, this is your old-style, old-school game of football, pouring down with rain. You know, it was just like the old days.
Childhood memories.
It was childhood memories of... Obviously, about 15 years ago, and it was a great game of football. And Manchester United, Manchester United look like a club that are in trouble. People are going, there's problems here with Ralph Rangnick, the manager, and players aren't happy. And it is amazing how fickle we all can be when it comes to a game of football, because all of a sudden Manchester United, now they're in fourth and look like they're going to be in the Champions League and everything's great. Spurs, my team, did the same thing on Saturday. Even I was thinking, goodness me, they're going to end up losing by about 7-0. Go to Manchester City, win 3-2, the most unbelievable game. I'm taken in by the whole thing, being the fickle football fan that I am, and everything's great again. So there's been some great football over the weekend.
Okay, good stuff.
But it is interesting, though, because, I mean, with Man United, there's been a lot of talk of this division in the dressing room. And I mean, do we believe any of that?
Well, you believe it when they're losing, but then when they're winning, then players will come out and go, there's no such thing as division, everybody's very happy. But that's just the way the game is. When things are going bad, of course, then you start getting leaks and everybody starts saying this and that. When things are going well, then it all seems to quieten up. It's the same as when you've got owners of clubs as well. Problems, we can't work with this, we can't stand the owners of our club. Then winning starts happening. And everything's
I'm sure it's not unique to football. Yeah, I'm sure that happens in businesses and all sorts. Finally, not finally in our sports section, but finally we have got, just before the close of the Beijing Olympics, a medal.
We have.
Team GB.
Well, we got a couple. But my favourite quote that's been from the last 24 hours is Georgie Harland. Now, Georgie Harland is the chef de mission, which means that she's in charge of Team GB. And she came out with this quote, which was quite innocent and made sense, but I've got to say it did make me laugh, because she said, we're really happy because on the plane home, we've got 10 medals. But that's because they're team sports, so you get 5 gold medals from the women winning the curling, and then you got 5 silver medals from the men. So when they say that it was up to Team GB to try and win 3 to 7 medals, we've gone over that. We've won 10. Yeah. So it's been a huge, huge success. That's the way you spin things in sport.
22 million quid we spent on Team GB. Well, I don't know, in the scheme of things, is that a lot of money or not? I mean,
well, 2 billion a month on lateral flows, I'm still trying to get over this morning.
Yeah.
Honestly, if we had no natural flows, can you imagine the gold medals we'd have?
Should we have spent more, or is 22 million quid a waste of money?
It's, you know, if you look at the amount of money in football, you can't get a decent footballer for 22 million or an average footballer. It's, you know, it's horses for courses. 22 million, 9.53 million was spent on ski and snowboard events, so no medals from there. The skeleton, now this is where we'd had 2 gold medals before, and £6.42 million was spent on skeleton. There was complaints about, oh yeah, the actual skeleton itself isn't right, there's this and that. And then you've got our bobsleigh, so the 4-man bobsleigh. Now these guys had to fund themselves. They're going round, they're just trying to get sponsorship, they're doing it all themselves. They end up coming 6th. Which, for what they've done, is remarkable.
Actually amazing.
I mean, you talk about Cool Runnings and the Jamaican stuff. What these guys have done is pretty much on no funding, having to do it all themselves.
Yeah.
So, you know what? It's really difficult to say. If you want success, you're going to have to pay, but Winter Olympics should be our priority.
I guarantee the Russians will have spent more than that on their Olympic programme.
Yeah, on just heart medicine.
Yes, well, exactly. Let's not... Shall we squeeze in some tennis before the end? British #1 Cameron Norrie beat Riley Opelka.
Riley Opelka, I think he's the tallest tennis player. He's 6'11".
What?
That's 6'11". 6'11", this guy.
He could walk over the net then.
I know, that's it. Can you imagine that? I'm thinking that's like 4 inches taller than I am. So, I mean, the speed that he could... the speed that he could in this chair. Okay, so the speed that he hits the ball and the height that he hits the ball. But Cam Norrie, he is the British #1. And this is the 3rd tournament he's won. He's gone from number 73 in the world now to number 13. Quietly going about his business.
Just snuck up on me.
By the time we get to France, by the time we get to Wimbledon, who knows what this guy could do? But Cameron Norrie, British #1, and he's our player for the future.
Right.
See the height of...
How old is he?
Oh,
sorry to put you on the spot. No, the only reason I'm asking that is, you know, does he have a good stint ahead of him?
Oh, yeah,
he's
put it this way. He's probably got a good 10 years on it.
Yeah, that's why she's asking.
Don't you start. Oh,
I know.
Back in your box.
I know it too well.
Back in your box, Cheeky. Paul, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so cheeky.
It's true, though. Coming up, we'll take you through the papers with Emily Carver and Andre Walker. Stay with us.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 7:32. This is Breakfast on GB News. We're live on your TV and radio. Very warm welcome to you.
I love the fact we had a message from someone earlier on, forget your name, I do apologise, who said they've been heading to work, listening to us on the radio, got to work, put the TV on, keep going.
Oh, yeah. Everywhere you go, stick us on all the TVs. We love to have it on everywhere. There's no excuses.
Yes. Now, let's look at the newspapers for you this morning. We'll start with the Daily Telegraph. It says the Queen does not expect senior members of the family to change their plans as she continues with some duties despite her positive COVID test.
The Times is looking into the Prime Minister's plan to live with COVID as free tests will be limited and self-isolation will be scrapped in England.
For The Guardian, it has conflicting reports about Russia's plan to invade Ukraine, with President Macron announcing that President Putin is still open to negotiating with the US.
And the Daily Star is looking into the storms that have both battered and are yet to hit the UK during this very windy February.
Time to go through the papers then in a bit more detail with political commentator Andre Walker and columnist Emily Carver. Good to see you both this morning. Andre, let's kick off with you. Should we be looking at Mr Sunak?
Yes, isn't it great? Rishi Sunak has warned Conservative MPs that, and I quote, "You can't have it both ways. You've got to choose between tax cuts and public spending boosts." Tax cuts then. Right, easy. Right, move on. I cannot believe it falls to me to tell a Conservative Chancellor that there is no magic money tree and you can't just spend and destroy the British economy. But we sit in a position today where a so-called Conservative government is wiping out the British economy by putting up taxes. What is it? 4 million people are going to move into higher tax brackets now? The whole thing is absolutely crazy. And the money that's been poured down the toilet, the £2 billion that you were complaining about on these tests, but also the one that I thought was most egregious was this eat out to help out. They sent us all down to order a pizza for half price and then shut the pubs and restaurants anyway. Money has been tipped down the toilet, left, right and centre, and we're now paying the bill.
Well, the big argument, I suppose, from Rishi Sunak is that he wants to try and sort out social care. It's a big legacy thing for the Prime Minister and, of course, to try and help with the backlog in the wake of COVID. And they do seem resolutely determined to increase national insurance in April, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think as a country, we don't perhaps take into account trade-offs enough. You know, if you want to boost spending in one area, the social care, the NHS, then you likely have to look for cuts elsewhere. And of course, the Treasury constantly has requests for more money from very, important groups, from activists, from different departments and so on, and they have to balance it. So Rishi Sunak needs to start, looking at how we can actually balance the books, not to be cliche, but look at where we can actually cut spending because it's out of control and we can't continue on with emergency level amounts of spending.
And remember, when Boris Johnson turned round to the Red Wall and talked about increased public spending, he wasn't talking about giving it in furlough schemes. He wasn't talking about tipping it down the toilet. He was talking about critical infrastructure, the idea being that if you start building things like, I don't know, the link from Manchester to Sheffield, the rail link, then the amount of tax take will increase. This is just blind spending. And I'll tell you something that annoys me. And people say it's not linked, but I genuinely think it is. You cannot be putting up national insurance when you've done nothing about the level of fraud in the furlough scheme. There was those complaints from, what was it, the National Crime Agency, $5 billion and no proper investigation. I think it's shameful.
Yeah, and there was ministerial resignation over that as well.
Maybe that will come at some point, though.
Well, I would hope so.
But it's difficult then to start clawing the money back, isn't it?
Without a doubt.
With a few years down the line. Talking about clawing money back, Emily, universities, this is in the Daily Mail. Yesterday in the papers, it was saying Russell Group universities had like £22 billion in profit or something like that, some huge amount. Ministers now saying universities must stop online lessons because everyone's paying out their university fees. We're not getting a university experience.
Well, exactly. 24 Russell Group members have collectively amassed a surplus of more than £2.2 billion.
2.2.
And that's an analysis from the Sunday Telegraph yesterday. That's a huge amount of money, and people are obviously raising concerns. Well, why on earth are you still continuing to have online classes, in which case? And also, perhaps there's an argument to give some of that money to students, or indeed to give them some money back from all the lessons that they missed. Because for a lot of students, it simply wasn't the university experience that they paid for, that they were given. So I think calls for money to be given back to students are growing.
Is that the difference? I love the fact you didn't say it's not the experience they expected. but this is the experience they paid for. I mean, it is transactional now, isn't it?
Well, it is very transactional, and considering so many people now go to university, people are essentially just paying to get a better job, a signal to employers that they are employable. And I think we've sort of lost the academic rigour of our in our institutions, perhaps.
Yeah, and not just paying, getting into debt. You know, starting out in a terrible position, even if it does mean that they get a better job. Go on.
We intended with this system. I say we as a country. I wasn't clearly involved in anything academic ever, but the intention was that universities were supposed to compete against each other. All they appear to have done is all jacked up the fees to the highest possible level and just nailed students to the desk. I'll tell you what I'd love to see, by the way. I'd love to see a system a little bit more like American in one respect, that if you are just interested in getting an other standard degree, you go to your local university, live at home effectively, and do it maybe in 2 years. Whereas if obviously if you're going to do something specialist, then you go elsewhere. I don't understand this whole thing where everybody moves away for 3 years, everybody pays $9,000 a year, everybody lives in halls of residence. I just think it's wasteful for a lot of people.
But you know, everyone would just stick around the capital then. It is a really good way to get people moved around the great corners of the country.
But
people going to Aberystwyth University, for example, who would probably never have gone there otherwise.
Well, I mean, nobody would go to
Aberystwyth is beautiful.
Do you know what the thing is? GB News is all about talking about the whole country. I can't say that. I can't say that.
No, you can't.
But funnily enough, I did my master's degree part-time in as an evening course at Birkbeck in the University of London. I think doing a lot more of that sort of thing, the idea of the lifelong learning, I think is a lot better.
I went to Bristol and I loved getting out of the home counties.
I think there's a lot. There's a lot to be said for it. My nephew's in Hull at the moment. I'd never been to Hull. Hull has not got a good reputation nationally. It's the most beautiful city.
But I think it also severs that link between young people and where they grew up, which may also be impacting the levelling up agenda, because in Germany and other countries in Europe, people go to university where they grew up, and therefore they're more likely to stay in that area and get a job there, whereas now we have everyone sort of trying to come to London if they want to get a well-paid job, and, you know, it just makes things more difficult in that respect.
You know, people forget that internal migration problem is a huge problem in the southeast of England. People like me from Manchester moving down south and ruining it.
Yes.
Exactly. I want to turn our attention to this story, Andre, which you've chosen, page 20 in The Times. This was after a huge story last week into cow abuse that was revealed. Now it's been revealed that this farm was actually supplying both Costa and British Airways with dairy.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sounds silly and you almost start laughing when you hear about the story about cow abuse. However, really, no, I said it sounds silly until you get into it.
Okay.
But this footage that was uncovered by an organisation called Advocates for Animals, they have discovered all this sort of terrible stuff, cows being hit with spades, and then them hoisting up the cows and forcing them to run on the front feet, which obviously is a hugely, terrifying thing. I don't know if we're allowed to name the farm, but it's in Carmarthenshire, and a number of companies now have decided that they're not going to take the milk anymore from them. But this is a major operation. The farm was bought for £1 million, which is a huge slice of Wales, I would suggest, and there's 650 cows there. But it just shows you that, you know, there is a problem with the farming industry as we get more intensive, because all of us want cheaper and cheaper food.
Well,
and of course...
Well, I don't know if it's fair to say that there's a problem with the farming industry. I mean, this is obviously a bad example, but,
yes.
But most farmers, I mean, the beauty of farmers is that they really care for their animals.
Well, I think the point I was trying to make was, I think as we demand lower and lower prices, I think it's harder to maintain standards. Now, look, clearly, actually, to be fair, the owner of this farm wasn't present at the time the abuse was taking place. So actually, there's no suggestion that he was involved. So I don't want to blame him. But I do think that we need to start thinking about less intensive farming and maybe spend a few pence more. But then again, that's easy for me to say. If you're a struggling family, then it's much more difficult.
But this is why trade deals... this is why trade deals with countries around the world are so important, breaking down those import barriers so that we can get cheaper meat from elsewhere. I mean, it's not the case that only British farming is up to scratch.
Yeah. Just very quickly, Emily, in the Daily Mail, or page 43 Mail again, could being attractive be linked to having a better immune system?
Yes.
Come on.
Well, apparently, according to Dr. Max, the mind doctor who has a column in the Daily Mail by the looks of things, he said that a study published last week has shown that those who are attractive and the measures of this are having a symmetrical face,
right,
means that you may have a better immune system. And then it goes on to list all the benefits of being good-looking in terms of people treat you better, people have an unconscious bias towards you. But then it also says, for balance, that good-looking people may be considered arrogant, they may have other such issues, they may be prone to be seen as a threat. But apparently it's better for parents to want their child to be good-looking than brainy. Because they may live longer. They're less likely to drop dead, apparently.
Can I tell you, my immune system's solid as a rock. Solid as a rock.
So we've disproved that theory right there.
You've got a very symmetrical face.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
It is.
That's what I tell myself.
Emily Carver, Andre Walker, thank you both very much. Enjoyed that. We'll see you again at around 8:30 for another round of the papers. But now we're going to turn our attention to Australia. Have you ever been down under?
No, I haven't. No, but I would very much like to. Australia has opened its... Stop laughing, Andre. Australia has opened its borders to international visitors for the first time in nearly 2 years following the country's implementation of one of the strictest COVID regimes in the world.
Well, native Aussies were allowed to return from late last year, but the majority of foreigners have been barred from travel until now. Fully vaccinated travellers don't need to quarantine, although those who've not been jabbed still have to isolate for 2 weeks at their own expense. Let's bring in the Independent's travel correspondent, Simon Caldo, who I'm pleased to say, as you can see, is there in Sydney Harbour with the iconic Opera House behind him. Gosh, what was the atmosphere like as the plane came into land?
Well, it was actually quite muted, surprisingly, that this is the first time that me or any other international tourist has been allowed here. But that was because I think I'm about the only tourist here. I've been walking around all day. It's been absolutely gorgeous until this rainstorm just started a couple of minutes ago. But literally no foreign tourists. The people on the plane seem to be returning Australians, maybe the odd business traveller, but no actual tourists. And that's a serious problem for the Australians. I mean, just think of the paperwork. I had to fill in an incredibly complicated form. I had to be double jabbed. I had to take a lateral flow test in the 24 hours before getting on board. Really tough stuff. And you're not allowed to go to Western Australia. That's still closed for another 12 days. However, when we got to Sydney Airport, I was on the, I think, first or second flight. Everyone was given a koala and some red flowering gum to welcome us to Australia. They desperately need us back. It's a question of whether, having had that big keep out sign for a couple of years, people have kind of forgotten about Australia.
I guess people still want to get back there, but there is an issue, Simon, isn't there, in terms of what tourists can do when you get there? Because, I mean, the industry itself must be pretty wound down.
Exactly right, yes. I mean, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, for example, over here, normally there would be tourists clambering all over it. No bridge climbs today. A lot of hotels are having problems, partly because I haven't got any guests, but also because I haven't got any staff. Lots of them rely on working holidaymakers, and there's been very few of those coming in. So, yes, it's sort of fairly dormant. Lots of Australians coming to Sydney, but that doesn't make up for the Brits, and in particular the Chinese and the New Zealanders, who are the two main nationalities coming to Australia. Well, they're not travelling anywhere at the moment. Having said all that, if you do want to have a bit of winter sun, well, not right now, but you know what I mean, then you can get here pretty easily if you're fully jabbed. Fares I paid about £1,200 return, so not too bad. And you will be very warmly welcomed. It's just, you'll see the place in extraordinary circumstances. We're going into winter in the southern hemisphere, and it'd be interesting to see how many tourists actually turn up between now and then.
Very interesting. Simon, I was imagining that your arrival at the airport, it would be like the opening scenes of the Love Actually movie, you know, where Hugh Grant says the words, love is everywhere, and you just stand back and watch these emotional reunions as people have been reunited. But was there a bit of that, any of that?
No, there was literally nothing. I mean, it was a complete media scrum because it's the biggest story which has happened in Australia for 2 years, just about. So everyone was being pounced on by camera crews and so on. But there wasn't any of these great I haven't seen you for years. I guess they only told us 2 weeks ago that we could come back in. People like me who don't have a real job, that's fine. I could pick it up. But most other people have sort of responsibilities and simply can't get away at the drop of a hat. The idea is, talking to the travel companies, they say, yeah, they're getting loads and loads of inquiries about Australia, but actual bookings are focusing very much on the end of the year, October, November, December, which of course is going into the southern summer and that all-important Christmas spell. And if you're going to be going over then, well, expect to pay absolute top dollar for your flights.
I was going to ask about the flights, actually, Simon. I mean, I would love to go to Australia just to be on the other side of the planet, really, and experience that. But what are the flights like? Because that's what puts me off more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're at Heathrow, you're wearing a mask while you're waiting for your flight. You're on the flight, it was about 12, 14 hours out to Tokyo, wearing a mask. In Tokyo Airport, where I was changing planes, wearing a mask. And then another 8 or 9 hours flying down from there, wearing a mask. And so, yeah, it is a bit onerous. It's not like normal times. And so it's, travel remains, particularly if you're going to be coming to the other side of the road, the world, something for the bold and the desperate, rather than just holidaymakers who think, oh, it'd be quite lovely. Because what with all the bureaucracy, the red tape you have to do, it's pretty grueling, pretty arduous, just to get all your ducks in a row to come over here.
Well, Simon, I don't know how long ago you set off, but there's been a lot of interest in flights, departures and arrivals due to this barrage of storms that we're experiencing here in the UK. Pleased or not pleased to report that this morning more storms on the horizon. And of course, lots of planes actually having serious problems with those emergency landings and takeoffs.
Well, yeah, now look, these things are absolutely spectacular, and Big Jet TV, what a fantastic spectacle it is. However, there is never any danger. The men and women who are flying those aircraft are absolutely trained for those circumstances in simulators. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what the parameters are. They know whether or not they're going to be able to land that aircraft, and if they're at all in any doubt, then off they go for a go around, or indeed, as we saw, divert to Paris or to Bordeaux in France or wherever. So no danger, absolutely spectacular. But if you're an anxious flyer, I very much hope that watching those scenes actually makes you feel better, because you know what incredible professionalism and safety obsession there is in aviation.
Oh, isn't that an interesting perspective? I like that. That's really looking at the positive side of it. Simon, how long are you down there for?
I'm here for a week, and hopefully the weather's going to pick up a bit. But right now, well, it's a little bit of a washout. But on the other hand, it's getting close to 6 o'clock. I might even have to have a beer in a few minutes and reflect on life on the other side of the world.
Oh, a little tinny, that'll be nice. You were aboard one of the 50 international flights to reach Australia today, 27 of which arriving in Sydney. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Very nice to see you, and Koala say hi.
Ah,
bring him back.
Lovely.
Bring him back. Simon, thank you.
Have you ever been on board a flight as it's aborted a landing?
Yes, once.
Yeah, same here. Terrifying.
It was into Heathrow. It was a bit scary, but also quite exciting in a weird way.
I was flying into Madeira for a little weekend away with my mum, and they'd had some landslides and some turbulence, and it was looking dodgy. And the wheels were down, and we must have been maybe metre and a half from landing, and the pilot and we went, so steep that things were flying. It was scary, but it was obviously the right decision.
So it is a bit scary. We've been talking about house prices earlier on this morning, because they've gone up £8,000. Obviously, it's on the asking price, so £8,000 in the last month. Robert says housing crisis isn't bad everywhere. Morning, Robert. My brother bought 2 houses in County Durham for 70 grand. I mean, that is cheap, isn't it? But Steve says trying to buy a house in Manchester is nearly impossible. You can never get a booking unless you're really quick. That's going to look round.
Also had a few messages about the storm. Peter says, I flew into Stansted last night from Poland, circled overhead for an hour trying to land, really thought we'd flip over. The pilot did an amazing job. And Liam says, morning, sorry to hear about the storm. I live in Spain and it's 22 degrees without a cloud in the sky. Well, good for you, Liam.
Yes, very nice.
But lovely that you're watching us from Spain. Thank
Patty,
you all listening.
Good morning to you, Patty. She says, at least I can enjoy my morning cuppa with a decent, well-balanced, pleasant news programme. Thank you. Well, you're very, very welcome. But what are you going to eat for breakfast along with your
now
cup
you're
of tea?
asking.
Yeah, because packing your diet full of vegetables, apparently, does not protect against heart disease.
Yes. The findings challenge previous research that suggests eating more vegetables is linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular disease, leading to potential strokes, heart attacks and death.
Now, researchers say past studies may not have taken into account lifestyle factors like smoking, drinking alcohol and meat intake. Let's talk to a nutritionist, should we? Kim Pearson, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. Heck, talk about confusing advice then.
Absolutely. It is very confusing. But the first thing that I would say is that this should not discourage anybody from eating vegetables. Just because this new research is calling into question the extent to which vegetable intake impacts our risk of cardiovascular disease, it doesn't mean that we should stop eating them. Vegetables are certainly beneficial for many aspects of health.
It's a bit confusing, though, isn't it, in the fact they say, well, they hadn't previously taken into account smoking and drinking a lot. Well,
that was a silly study, then.
I mean, if you're a big smoker and a big drinker, I can't imagine that healthy eating is really top of your agenda anyway.
You're absolutely right. This is why studies on lifestyle and diet habits and disease risk are so challenging to run. Very often you find that people who have healthy habits, such as a higher vegetable intake, will also not smoke, exercise more regularly, and be more mindful about their diet in general. So it does make it harder to establish which of the healthy habits is contributing to the reduced risk of disease.
OK, so let's assume then that people aren't smoking and drinking heavily. Vegetables then, is it still the case that they do have benefits for cardiovascular disease? And if so, which ones? I always think pulses are supposed to be really good. I don't know if I've made that up.
To keep you having a pulse.
Yes, exactly.
Well, pulses are high in fibre, and previous research has linked increased fibre intake to a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. And there are many beneficial nutrients present in vegetables that could potentially help to reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease. But the most important thing is looking at optimizing our metabolic health. So metabolic syndrome is the biggest predictor of cardiovascular disease. Metabolic syndrome is a cluster of conditions, including high blood sugar levels, high blood pressure, elevated blood lipids, so cholesterol, and triglycerides, and reduced waist circumference. And the best way to reduce metabolic syndrome and prevent metabolic syndrome is to have a whole food diet that is including minimal amounts of processed, refined foods.
A lot of it, Kim, sounds just like common sense. We seem to have a bit of good old common sense on a lot of this and try and eat healthily when we can. Kim Pearson, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
With the time at 7:56, we're going to take a break. Do stay tuned. At the top of the 8, we'll have more on Storm Franklin and, unfortunately, all the other storms that are due our way. But first of all, here's your all-important Monday morning forecast.
So the UK is looking gradually calmer as Storm Franklin moves away, allowing the winds to ease. Let's have a look at the details for you. And bright across southwest England by lunchtime, but still very windy with gales over the hills around the coast as well. The odd shower is possible, temperatures climbing into double figures.
Showers will still be a little more frequent across southeast England and the London area, but gusty winds here will make it feel colder than the numbers suggest.
Our gales around the coast and over the higher ground of Wales will slowly ease as well. Some sunshine developing, but perhaps the odd sharp shower too.
It's a mixed morning for the Midlands with sunny spells and a few showers. Very windy here as Storm Franklin clears through. Temperatures climbing to around 10 Celsius by midday.
Now, plenty of sunny spells for northern England, but the wind's still strong in the west. A few showers possible, but most places will stay dry. Temperatures generally staying in single figures.
Scattered showers will continue across Scotland, falling as snow over the higher ground. Winds easing from the north and west, but still blustery in the east. Highs of 8 degrees in Edinburgh.
And Northern Ireland will also be largely dry with some sunny spells across the province, but those gusty winds are continuing. Not as strong as they have been overnight. That's the good news. The highs there of 10 Celsius.
And then it will be largely dry throughout the rest of the day across the UK, but rain moving back into the far west by evening. That's how your weather's shaping up this Monday morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 21st of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
Well, we're live right across the UK, on your TV, on your radio, online as well. And if you happen to be watching on YouTube, then hit that subscribe button. Coming up for you this morning.
Boris Johnson will lay out his plan for living with COVID later today. The PM's expected to tell the country that vaccination, testing and antiviral treatments will be relied upon to keep the country safe instead of social restrictions.
Well, it comes as the Queen tests positive for coronavirus. The palace insists she just has mild, cold-like symptoms and will carry on with light duties at the palace.
And a third named storm is hitting the UK. Storm Franklin brings more power cuts and travel disruptions, with flooding prompting evacuations in parts of the UK.
Also today, President Biden has agreed in principle to a summit with President Putin. So, can war in Ukraine be averted?
So, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So the Prime Minister will unveil his plan for living with COVID today. He's set to remove all COVID restrictions from England, stating the country is in a different world from when the pandemic started.
Well, it comes as the Queen has tested positive for coronavirus. In a statement yesterday, Buckingham Palace said Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to carry out light duties this week. Our reporter Ellie Costello is outside Windsor Castle for us. Very good morning to you, Ellie. So Her Majesty will continue to work. What sort of work do light duties involve?
Good morning, Stephen and Isabel. Yes, we're just outside Windsor Castle, where we know the Queen is recovering from coronavirus and will continue with those light duties. And it does mean things like what we saw yesterday when she congratulated the Team GB curling team for winning gold at the Olympics. It was put on the royal Twitter page yesterday. So that's the sort of light duties that we are talking about, and we are often seeing the Queen pictured with a red briefcase where she signs laws, so she'll also be doing that sort of thing. And this week we have seen the Queen do video links with ambassadors, new ambassadors from around the world. So that is the sort of thing that we can expect to see the Queen partaking in the next week or so. But the latest lines that we have on how the Queen is today is royal sources have told me that yesterday she was watching her horse at the Newbury races yesterday. She was watching it on the television from Windsor Castle. So that will bring a sense of relief to people that were very concerned after this statement from Buckingham Palace yesterday, confirming that Her Majesty had tested positive for coronavirus. At least that seems like she isn't suffering too badly. So let's take a look at that statement now for you. The statement said that the Queen is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but does continue and will continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. And it goes on to say that she will continue to receive medical attention and will follow all of the appropriate guidelines. So that was the statement from Buckingham Palace yesterday. A rare statement, Stephen and Isabel. The Queen's private medical business is very rarely shared with the public, let alone on the day when something significant happens. And the Queen tested positive yesterday, and we had that statement by lunchtime. So it was a very rare statement, but I think very deliberate to allow the public to know of the Queen's condition, but also to downplay any panic. They don't want anybody to think that this is serious at this stage, and that is why there is that emphasis on those light duties that the Queen will be undertaking this week at Windsor Castle. And Stephen and Isabel, great efforts have been put in to make sure that the Queen has been safe throughout this pandemic. That photograph of the Queen at her husband's funeral last year has become almost symbolic of the pandemic, and it represents the self-sacrifice that so many people have made to keep themselves safe. And indeed, the Queen has been kept safe here behind me at Windsor Castle for the past 2 years in what was dubbed HMS Bubble, and that is that small group of around 20 staff that have been surrounding the Queen for the past 2 years. But royal sources have told me that the Queen was aware that she would get coronavirus at some stage, and indeed that is what happened yesterday. She tested positive for coronavirus, and many people in HMS Bubble in Windsor Castle have tested positive this week as well. Prince Charles tested positive on the 10th of February. He had met with his mother 2 days prior to that. And we also know that his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, she is still self-isolating after testing positive as well. So this is certainly something that has been going around the royal household. But I think, Isabel and Stephen, this statement from Buckingham Palace is very British in style. It's very keep calm and carry on attitude from the palace, and it's business as usual for the Queen. We do know that her doctor, her personal doctor, Sir Hugh Thomas, is in charge of her care here. She will be kept under close observation in these next few days, but the palace wants us to know that there's no need for panic. She's in the palace and she's receiving the best possible care.
OK, Ellie, thank you very much.
It's interesting. I mean, we've sort of dealt with the palace for a long time now, haven't we? And if there was any real concern about her health, they wouldn't have said anything at this stage.
No, I think we should be reassured, and that is good news. She's being typically stoical.
I like this keep calm and carry on attitude.
Well, isn't she the epitome of that? Her Majesty the Queen's the epitome of that, isn't she? Never complain, never explain, duty first, keep calm, carry on, all those.
That is so very
British. OK, look, with the time at 8:07, let's take a look at the headlines this hour. The Prime Minister says scrapping the requirement to self-isolate in England will bring the country towards a return to normality and finally give people back their freedom. Boris Johnson will meet with his cabinet this morning before updating MPs on his living with COVID blueprint. Some health experts, however, have been critical with the idea of lifting the legal requirement to quarantine after positive results.
Union leaders have hit out at possible government plans to charge for COVID tests, calling it an act of madness during a cost of living crisis. The TUC says it will disproportionately hit frontline and low-paid workers, and it's urging the Prime Minister to put public health first instead of internal party politics. But Business Minister Paul Scully says the $2 billion a month spent on tests could be better used elsewhere.
Train operators have warned passengers to stay at home if possible, as Storm Franklin is expected to bring major disruption. Yellow weather warnings are in place for England and the east of Scotland, and the Met Office has issued an amber warning for Northern Ireland. Environment agencies have also issued hundreds of alerts for flooding across the UK, and parts of Greater Manchester have been evacuated.
President Biden has agreed in principle to some talks with President Putin as long as Russia holds off any invasion plans of Ukraine. The coming week will be crucial for democracy, according to the Prime Minister, after he spoke to the French President Emmanuel Macron about the growing tensions. But there is more concern over increased shelling in the region and Russia extending military drills in Belarus.
As we've been reporting this morning, Australia has welcomed tourists back today after nearly 2 years. Vaccinated travellers have been greeted at Sydney's airport after some of the world's strictest pandemic measures were lifted. Some Australians were allowed to return down under last year, but most international tourists have had to wait. So if you are tuning in for the first time or listening for the first time this morning and wondering where Mr. Eamonn Holmes is this morning, he is on half-term.
I'm just the younger version of Eamonn.
You are indeed.
No, I'm very much the stand-in. Mr. Holmes is having a week off, quite right too. 5 mornings a week. You must be exhausted.
Yeah, it's been a lot. But we love it, and he'll be back on Monday morning, and I'm very happy to be in your company for the next few days.
Julia says, I love this, Julia, because I sort of dream of retirement, really. Might be 20 years.
You're so funny. You've talked about retirement about 4 times this morning. You're only how old? 42?
I'm 48
there you go.
Next week. I'm 48 next week. Julia says, this is my first day of retirement. Congratulations to you. I hope it's like a lovely, just that alarm not going off and things. You and Isabel together are the dream team. Well, we're not the dream team, because we all have, but we're one of the dream teams.
Yeah, well, you and Anna are a fab combo, and we obviously love Eamonn, but we work well together. We've done it many years together.
More of you two together, please. Well, you've got us all week. Well, till Thursday.
That's right, yeah.
Till Thursday. Then back with Anne.
Stephen's doing a bit of a marathon. What is it, 10 days in total?
Yeah,
I actually don't think I've ever done 10 early shifts in a row.
Yeah, I'm going to be...
Have you done 10 before?
I don't
10
think
straight?
so.
Yeah, that's a record. I don't know if anyone in the UK has ever done that. If you've ever done 10 earlies before, let us know. It's quite a skill, because you're getting up, what, 2:30? 2:30.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all right on day 4, but by about Thursday... Oh, and we've got a night out on Wednesday, so Thursday should be interesting.
We're going for the awards night, aren't we?
We are, the Royal Television Society. We're looking forward to that. But yeah, Thursday could be interesting.
Free dinner. Free dinner and a night in a hotel.
Getting dressed up, can't wait.
Lucy says, just want to say how impressed I am that the Queen is continuing with some light duties despite having COVID, wishing her a speedy recovery, as we all do. She is an inspirational lady.
A few people are saying, gosh, she makes me feel like a wimp because she's coping so well with Omicron, and other people are saying they've had it not obviously so mildly, and but well done to Her Majesty.
And talking of testing and all the things that they're on about getting rid of the free testing and all the rest of it, and a lot of people complaining about getting rid of the free testing. Barbara says, more on to you, Barbara, my question to you is, if testing is the only way to know whether you've got COVID, why would you test for something that you don't even know you have?
Well, because you could pass it on to somebody like the Queen. inadvertently.
Well, yes, but if you go, you could always get hold. If you're in a, they're talking about potentially keeping it free for older categories and things and vulnerable categories. But when are we going to move on from this? Oh, actually, Julie on this one
of these
says, does nobody care about the extremely old or the vulnerable? All these people who say we need to go back to normal are wrong. I still have to take precautions. So, you know, I mean, I can understand people wanting to just get back to normal life. I do, Julie, but, you know, there are those in society who need to consider it a bit more carefully. It's a fair point. Keep your thoughts coming through. GBviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, it's 12 minutes past 8. We're going to talk about Storm Franklin now. It is, of course, the third storm to impact the UK in just a week, and it's causing further power cuts, transport disruptions and flooding.
Well, Franklin comes, of course, only days after Storm Eunice killed 3, potentially 4 people. I haven't got a definite figure on that, but still, people have died, and that's bad enough. It's left a record 1.4 million homes without power. Thousands, of course, are still yet to be reconnected.
And the Met Office has also issued an amber wind warning for Northern Ireland, while danger to life flood warnings have been issued in Greater Manchester. Residents there having to be evacuated from their homes last night.
Yeah, let's talk to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, who's in... Where are you, Doogie? I was trying to pronounce it there. I don't know that I can, but has it been a pretty grim night?
It has been very grim. I'm in Donegal in County Down, and it was the west coast of Northern Ireland that has took the brunt of this. Winds of 134 kilometres per hour recorded off Malin Head have hit Derry, Tyrone and Fermanagh. There is pumps being employed in the rivers in Omagh to stop them bursting their banks. And there's many trees down, especially in Fermanagh, causing traffic disruption. This is, as you've said, the third storm inside 7 days. Northern Ireland got away with the first 2. It's definitely taking a battering now, and it looks as if we're in for quite a day of it, with more and more power outages coming.
OK, stay safe, Doogie. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, do you know what? John Hammond just popped up. Yeah, hopefully, is he there? I'm just checking whether or not we can go to him. Fantastic. Well, let's get the opinion of meteorologist John Hammond. In fact, we're being told he's having some audio problems, so we'll try and re-establish that line. Apparently not linked to the weather. He will be able to tell us a little bit about some of the new storms on the horizon after Storm Franklin.
We've got Gladys, Herman and Imani.
Who names these?
I don't know, but I love the fact that in the Daily Star, they've got a picture of Gladys Pugh.
There we go. Gladys Pugh, yeah.
Gladys Pugh from Heidi High. Morning, campers.
Yeah, but why are there so many storms? Apparently it's to do with the jet stream, but it is unusual to have had 3 in quick succession. We've already had, and then another 3 on the horizon.
It's this naming thing, though, because I think the fact that we name them is making it...
Which only started 7 years ago or something like that, wasn't it?
Making it more sort of obvious. Whereas we would have just sort of said, it's been really windy.
I know. Well, do you know, it was funny, and people will have opinions about this and let us know what you think, but a part of me did think, gosh, the Prime Minister's now tweeting about being careful about windy weather. The world's gone a bit crazy, hasn't it? We react to weather stories in ways that we didn't. We used to just get on with it, didn't we? But, it was extreme on Friday. Gosh, the winds. And at least 4 trees down just where I live in southwest London. And thankfully nobody hurt in my corner of the world. But it has been, as you know, really, really bonkers. So we'll keep a close eye on how those storms are developing.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a bit like you. I sort of think, we just used to get on with it? It would be a bit more... I mean, I know it is grim if you're badly affected, and it is grim. And look, it gives us something to talk about, doesn't it? But
we British, we do love to talk about the weather.
Yeah, we do love to talk about the weather.
But whether or not this naming thing, as you're right, has made us more hyper-aware, or could it be down to climate change? The big C word.
Oh, yeah, well, who was I talking to over the weekend who was saying, no, they didn't think it was down to climate change, because...
Was it Amy Cameron?
No. But the storm was so unusual. Eunice was so unusual that the worst storm for, if not perhaps 87, but certainly the worst storm for 10 or 20 years. So, they were saying, I don't think that's climate related in itself. Liam, on the other hand, Liam, you want us to really dislike you, Liam. I think he says, sorry to hear about the storm. I live in Spain and it's 22 degrees without a cloud in the sky. Well, I'm glad you're watching us over in Spain on YouTube or on the app or whatever it is. But you don't need to rub it in.
Peter says, I flew into Stansted last night from Poland, circled overhead for an hour, trying to land. Really thought we'd flip over. The pilot did an amazing job. We also heard from Steve, didn't we, a little bit earlier from Liverpool. He said his bathroom windows had blown in, and he said Storm Franklin really was showing up Storm Eunice to have been nothing in comparison. So let us know your storm stories throughout the morning.
In the papers, we're talking about taxes. Andre was very unhappy with how the choice between taxes and public spending and all the rest of it. And he says, you're clearly not impressed with Mr. Sunak, our Chancellor. Lee says, I've been a Tory voter for the last 50 or so years. I will never vote Tory again. I refuse to be a cash cow for bad policy. Interesting. If you want to defend what we're doing in terms of the public finances, feel free to get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk, because we're all about differing views and differing opinion and talking about all of it.
Yeah, nothing off limits. Look, stay with us after the break. We're talking about diplomacy. Could that be the key to the Ukraine situation? We're talking about that after the forecast.
So the UK is looking gradually calmer as Storm Franklin moves away, allowing the winds to ease. Let's have a look at the details for you. And bright across southwest England by lunchtime, but still very windy with gales over the hills around the coast as well. The odd shower is possible, temperatures climbing into double figures.
Showers will still be a little more frequent across southeast England and the London area, but gusty winds here will make it feel colder than the numbers suggest.
Now, gales around the coast and over the higher ground of Wales will slowly ease as well. Some sunshine developing, but perhaps the odd sharp shower too.
It's a mixed morning for the Midlands with sunny spells and a few showers. Very windy here as Storm Franklin clears through. Temperatures climbing to around 10 Celsius by midday.
Now, plenty of sunny spells for northern England, but the wind's still strong in the west. A few showers possible, but most places will stay dry. Temperatures generally staying in single figures.
Scattered showers will continue across Scotland, falling as snow over the higher ground. Winds easing from the north and west, but still blustery in the east. Highs of 8 degrees in Edinburgh.
And Northern Ireland will also be largely dry with some sunny spells across the province, but those gusty winds are continuing. Not as strong as they have been overnight. That's the good news. The highs there of 10 Celsius.
And then it will be largely dry throughout the rest of the day across the UK, but rain moving back into the far west by evening. That's how your weather's shaping up this Monday morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The time is 8:21. This is Breakfast on GB News. We're live on your TV and radio this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and don't forget to take us with us when you're heading out and about today. Now, President Biden and our Prime Minister have both continued to insist that a diplomatic solution to the Ukraine crisis is possible. Yesterday, President Macron helped the US and Russia to agree, in principle at least, to attend a summit amid Ukrainian tensions. So can peace really be achieved?
Well, here to tell us more is Ewan Grant. He's a former intelligence analyst for former Soviet states. Very warm welcome to the studio, to the show. Look, it was a very tense weekend. Things looked to be de-escalating towards the end or the middle of last week, and then things again have started to get very worrying. What's the mood music, do you think, now? Because it's a continually developing picture. We've now had this news that President Putin and President Biden are to hold a principle. They've agreed in principle to hold a summit. Is that significant, do you think?
Yes, it is. It gives a little more time, maybe a bit more time, but days rather than weeks.
Yeah. In terms of what President Putin says he wants, rather than maybe what he actually wants, I mean, do we need to pay that a little bit more attention?
How long is a piece of string? Certainly, for many years now, and this is particularly strong in Putin's circle because of their age, what their experiences in the 80s and 90s, the West did not treat Russia with respect in the 90s. But that was a failure of imagination and sensitivity. It was not malice. We have to remember the fundamental line. It's not just about Ukraine and the demands they've been making, realistic or not, for a withdrawal of Western NATO forces from the Eastern NATO countries. Those countries, Poland, the Baltic states and the others, they all asked to join because they're frightened of Russia. It's not the other way round, and they've got good reason to be frightened.
Look, President Macron is said to have held a 2-hour phone call with President Putin last night. Clearly, there is lots to discuss between the West and Russia. What do you think will have been discussed? And, what more is there to discuss? I mean, obviously, the threat of sanctions being heavily waved over the Russians. And do you think that that is the only thing that will really prevent this from tipping over into war, do you think?
To be honest, I think yes. The depth of the sanctions and the building up of more information to make those more effective than they would be, and of course how effective is a very moot point, that wins time for us to get ready. It is very noticeable that the Western counter-disinformation campaign seems to be getting pretty effective. The Bellingcat organisation, which remember called out Russia on MH17, the Malaysian airliner, has been very active almost in the last few hours, and that is continuing now. And those...
Saying what?
Pointing out that the provocations which have led to Russia denouncing Ukrainian actions against the people in the Donbass are false flags. They're fake. They're made up. They're lies.
And frankly, the provocation is the big worry at the moment, isn't it? I mean, Ukraine has got to be applauded, hasn't it, for maintaining a calm when they've had shellings and mortars around Donetsk and so many accusations and lies. The propaganda machine in Russia really whipping up a lot of anti-Ukrainian sentiment, and they haven't retaliated.
That's precisely the point. How long can their patience last? Because eventually the obvious risk must be they will respond, albeit respond rather than provoke.
I mean, in terms of provocation, though, what do you make of what we're hearing from, I mean, the Prime Minister talking about the potential of the bloodiest war since 1945, President Biden repeatedly going on saying it's imminent, it's going to happen, when nothing actually has. I mean, that rhetoric does seem to have been a little bit strange.
Well, I'm not so sure. It's probably been designed to stiffen the resolve and the preparation of some of the European NATO allies, particularly Germany and France. Remember that you can keep putting out predictions, and then people get punch drunk, crying wolf too often, and then they strike. I mean, the BBC's been running a documentary series on 1941, and of course that's precisely the point. Stalin had warning after warning after warning, ignored them, and then it became real.
It's a terrifying thought.
We've been here before.
Yeah, many experts were warning the timing of the Beijing Olympics would be absolutely key. We know that that's drawn to a close. We know that many of the sanctions that the West is threatening would actually be an act of self-harm, so many of them are quite reticent to impose them. All of that potentially emboldening President Putin. Do you think invasion is likely, as many people are saying, or do you think we're more likely to see perhaps a warfare in the cyber world, GCHQ and big organisations like that being attacked?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. On an earlier interview last week, I was asked by your colleagues what probability I put, and I thought 55-45, slightly more likely invasion. I wouldn't change that, but we may see a cyber invasion of such scale that it really devastates Ukraine, but will it trigger a Western response? So invasion over the internet, not invasion over the ground.
Yeah, interesting where we are in this century. Look, you're great, really good to talk to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, stay with us. After the break, we'll be looking at the newspapers today. We're joined by Emily Carver and Andre Walker. But first of all, take a look at the weather.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 8:30, bang on the nose. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel. I had to think about it then. Terrible.
It's hard if someone else's name is written in the audio.
We're live on your TV and on your radio this morning, right across the UK and across the world if you're watching online.
I'm sorry, I'm just sniggering. It's just like Anchorman, it's like question mark on there. Anyway, we digress. Let's look at the Monday morning newspapers.
Why do I bother? I should have stayed in bed.
The Daily Telegraph says the Queen does not expect senior members of her family to change their plans as she continues with some duties despite her positive COVID test.
The Times looks into the PM's plans to live with COVID as free tests will be limited and self-isolation scrapped in England.
The Guardian leads with conflicting reports about Russia's plan to invade Ukraine, with Macron announcing that Putin's still open to negotiating with the US.
Daily Star looks into the storms that have battered the UK and are set to hit us again. We've got Franklin underway. Gladys, Herman and Imani are coming, apparently.
OK, well, let's go through the papers this morning. We are joined by the political commentator Andre Walker, and he's joined by the columnist Ellen Millie-Carver. Well, warm welcome back. Thanks for staying with us this Monday morning. Emily, I want to start with you. You've chosen the story at the front of the Telegraph about misogyny and its status as a hate crime. What's their take on it?
Yeah, so this is an amendment to the police crime bill, which has been quite controversial because of the element against protests, which would see more restrictions on protests. But this is a call to add an amendment that would make misogyny a hate crime. And essentially, government ministers are very much against this, as they believe it would make it more difficult and not be very helpful to female victims of actual sexual crime. And it's a difficult one because misogyny, I mean, if you go so far as to make misogyny a hate crime, do you then have to make misandry a hate crime also? Would this lead to calls to make catcalling and such like a crime? And some people think that would be going too far. But it looks like
would be very, very hard to police.
Well,
surely.
exactly. And who knows what the motivation for a crime is? Sexual assault is already a crime. Harassment is already a crime when it's persistent. So whether there's a need to make misogyny itself a crime, I'm not so sure. It seems to be...
Andre?
Reminds me of Tony Blair and his 400 new criminal offences, including killing someone with a nuclear explosion, which was previously presumably not illegal. Anyway, I worry about this because I think it's constantly now about if I am personally offended, if you are personally offended, then the person that has offended you is somehow a criminal. And I really don't accept it. I'm not a big fan of hate crime legislation in general. I think people should be treated equally, but I recognise that there are some occasions, there are some instances and some types of people who are particularly targeted and perhaps they need to be protected better. I would personally do that through policing rather than make them people who get more protection when it comes to sentencing.
And of course, there's the elephant in the room, which is that our courts don't seem to be ever convicting rapists and those who have perpetrated sexual assault. So this just adds to the complexity of the law, but whether it actually helps women, I'm not so sure.
Although, of course, what the Crown Prosecution Service did was they promised that they would take more people to court who were accused of sex crimes. And, of course, that means you drop the standard of evidence. So fewer of them are convicted by percentage. And then they started complaining about that. Realistically, I think that it's just a very difficult area. But making misogyny illegal, I mean, I just think it's silly.
Oh, well, let us know what you think on that one.
That's that done.
Yeah.
Yeah, well...
Not to condone misogyny, though.
No, but should we stick with the gender, not debate, because misogyny is not really open for debate, but let's look at this story, Andre, you've chosen from the Mail. Could the security service reflect the recruitment of women into MI5 if the next Bond is a woman?
Well, you know, I understand why you would say this if you're Ken McCallum, the head of MI5. I personally am not a Bond fan. I don't particularly care. But, whoa, here we go. Is this going to end badly?
Great British export.
Although, I have to say, I look round at the way the security services have had so many amazing women, Baroness Trumpington being my personal favourite, and I think actually there should be more women reflected. But I personally wouldn't change Bond's gender. I'd probably have more people of different backgrounds being reflected. But Ken McCallum, who is the head of MI5, has said that he thinks that it would reflect how the security services actually are now, because they're effectively 50-50 male and female. And he said that basically, if Bond were to be a woman, it would reflect that. Of course, what it wouldn't reflect is that Bond's a member of MI6 and he's the head of MI5.
Yes.
But anyway, he's ignored that critical detail.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's something like this doesn't smell right.
I think this is basically, we're a bit bored this weekend, let's come up with a story. But I think it is important that our security services, insofar as possible, have a connection with the public. And I think this Ken McCallum appears to be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as if James Bond is a documentary. I mean, does it need to reflect exactly our security service? I'm not so
Well, of course, I think the other thing about James Bond is the intention was it's multiple different people wrapped in together. I had a friend of mine, I won't say who, but who was in the security services, and he said it was just incredibly boring. He said, I just looked at the computer all day, and he said people, when they found out, would think that I was running around with a gun. He said, just computer.
Yeah.
The way it's
well
all going
imagine.
these days.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the Sun, Emily.
Oh, yes.
Looking at White Van Man. And they're talking about the yearly fuel hike that we're seeing. I mean, it's all going up so madly at the minute. But it's not just White Van Man, is it? It's anyone who needs to get about for their work.
Well, it's anyone, but obviously the Sun's readership may include a lot of white van men, so I'm sure that's why they're concentrating on this. But yes, the Sun has said that white van drivers are facing a £500 hit this year as petrol costs continue to soar, and that's a huge amount. They say that, you know, the average van man drives up to 17,500 miles a year, and you can just see how the costs rack up with the cost of fuel so high. It says it's reached 148p a litre last week, up from 120p the same time last year. So that's a huge hike.
Big jump.
And I do think that the government needs to essentially ease that burden, and they can do so by removing some of those or lowering some of those taxes that we pay at the pump, because that is about 50% of what you pay when you fill up your car is government levies. So perhaps they could do that instead of raising the tax burden.
Well, yeah, but then we've got to pay tax elsewhere, haven't we? To balance, you were saying last hour, everything needs to be balanced out.
Well, I would argue that we need to go for growth, and that doesn't mean that means easing the tax burden to allow for that.
Right.
We may get more in the coffers as a result.
Ah, see, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think we agree on that. Singing from the same hymn sheet. In which case, let's turn our attention to a different story, Andre. Times is going with this, but it's in lots of the papers this morning about another price hike, but this time in the asking prices for houses. An extraordinary jump in 1 month, bigger than at any other time in the last 20 years. What's behind that?
Yes, so various newspapers have quoted different elements of the statistic, but the Times says that there has been an average house price jump of £8,000 in 1 month, the fastest in 20 years. Now, I don't think it's every month, I don't think it's consistent, but funnily enough, I noticed that The Guardian made the point that they reckoned it jumped by £40,000 since the beginning of the pandemic.
Your new favourite paper now.
I was going to say.
Twice he's quoted The Guardian this morning.
I've got to tell you something, honestly. Because my taxi was late this morning, they forced me. She picked all the good papers and I had to go with The Guardian.
No.
They were allocated, Andre. They were allocated.
We like to take a look at all of them. Go on.
But actually, obviously, there is this effect that people believe has happened. I'm sure it's right, which is people have ended up going on the right moves of this world and looking at houses and considering moving. But the thing that worries me, and it just follows on from this increase in fuel prices, and we talked in the last hour about the increases in tax. I mean, £8,000 in 1 month. You are getting to the stage where people have no prospect of buying their own home.
But the issue is obviously supply, and some estate agents and people who know about the property market are saying that many more houses and homes will come on the market in the spring. So there's some hope that perhaps may lower prices, because I don't know if you've looked at the housing market at the moment, but there just there aren't that many properties actually on the market at the moment. So
I just can't see prices going down.
No, I can't see.
Well, they never seem to, do they? I mean, every time you hear all these people, and we read in the papers all the time, oh, this little box has gone for 100,000 in London, and people go, oh, you'll end up in negative equity. I mean, it happened for 1 year, I think, in the 90s, and then that was the end of it. I mean, most people who bought a property have ended up making an absolute killing.
Well, yeah, they have. About 100 grand for a box in London. That'd be cheap.
Yeah, million.
It's just eye-watering when you see these sort of family homes going for £600,000-700,000. You just wonder how on earth people can ever afford them. Well, they can't, can they?
Well, they can't, no. But Robert got in touch this morning. He said the housing crisis isn't bad everywhere. My brother's just bought 2 houses in County Durham for 70 grand. I mean, they probably needed a lot of work, I should think.
Funnily enough, that's what I was talking about, I think, in the last time, about internal migration, about the fact that if you go to places like Manchester and Liverpool, you can get some really good bargains on property, but the problem is the number of people like me who are moving down south, get rid of me. That'd free up 2 houses in of itself, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Emily, let's finish on this story in the Mirror, and this is a story we've been talking about on GB News, actually, this cliff edge for bus lifeline. So many people in rural areas in particular dependent on their buses, but services are being axed left, right and centre, aren't they?
Yes, so Labour has come out, so this is from the Mirror, so that's a Labour backing paper, is saying that a third of bus services are at risk of being cut in the coming weeks. And this is because a lot of these bus services had a lot of COVID emergency funding to keep them going. But of course, numbers of people taking buses has actually been dropping for a long time now. So the question is raised over how sustainable our funding model is for bus services, which people are using less, but obviously are so important to those who do need them to use them. So there's a question over how we continue to fund this. The Institute of Economic Affairs has a paper out today on how COVID has impacted our transport, and there are many changes. You know, trains, for example, aren't going to be full all the time as they used to be, which begs the question how the transport network is going to make up all the revenue that was lost if people simply aren't using the transport in the way that they were before.
And it's cause and effect, isn't it? I mean, are the trains less full because fears of COVID, or is it because the prices are so expensive? And if they're empty, then the prices presumably have to get higher, which means they're even more empty.
Well, exactly, and there might well be the case that more people end up actually going into their cars. But then we've seen the price of fuel so high, so there's a lot of knock-on effects.
Yeah, there are. Look, Emily Carver, Andre Walker, it's been a joy.
It's always a joy.
Pleasure and a joy.
For you. It's a joy for you.
Yeah.
Never a chore.
Never a chore.
Yeah, well, thank you for starting
Andre's
the week
modesty
with
that I love. Good to see you. At 8:42, let's bring you up to date this morning. And the Prime Minister says scrapping the requirement to self-isolate in England will bring the country towards a return to normality and finally give people back their freedom. Boris Johnson will meet the Cabinet this morning before updating MPs on his Living with COVID blueprint. However, some health experts are critical. They're not happy, particularly about the requirement to lift quarantining after a positive result.
Union leaders have hit out at possible government plans to charge for COVID tests, calling it an act of madness during a cost of living crisis. The TUC says it will disproportionately hit frontline and low-paid workers, and it's urging the Prime Minister to put public health first ahead of internal party politics. But Business Minister Paul Scully has said the £2 billion spent on coronavirus tests every month could be better used elsewhere. Train operators have warned passengers to stay at home if possible, as Storm Franklin is expected to bring major disruption. Yellow weather warnings are in place for England and the east of Scotland, and the Met Office has issued an amber warning for Northern Ireland. Environment agencies have also issued hundreds of alerts for flooding across the UK.
President Biden has agreed in principle to talks with President Putin as long as Russia holds off any invasion plans of Ukraine. The coming weeks will be crucial for democracy, according to the Prime Minister, after he spoke to French President Emmanuel Macron about the growing tensions. But there is concern over increased shelling in the region and Russia extending military drills in Belarus.
Australia has welcomed tourists back today after nearly 2 years. Vaccinated travellers have been greeted at Sydney's airport after some of the world's strictest pandemic measures were lifted. Some Australians were allowed to return down under last year, but most international tourists have had to wait.
Now, how are you feeling a bit perky this morning?
I'm all right. Are you all right?
I'm
You're having a bit of a hypo.
I'm going hypo, actually, which is...
Just as well. We've got a doctor in the house.
Oh, excellent. Thank heavens.
It's our time for telemedicine. Dr. Emeka Okorocha joins us in the studio. First of all, tips for an ailing presenter.
I've just had a very quick slurp of hot chocolate, so that'll do the trick. In the meantime, thank heavens I'm not getting hiccups this morning.
Have some fruit.
It's never as much fun, is it? Randall's been in touch this morning.
Okay.
Right, let's kick straight off with all this. He says he's got an annoying tendency to get hiccups constantly, no matter what he eats. So what causes them and how does he stop getting them?
That's kind of interesting because hiccups are, a lot of people know hiccups are involuntary, spasm of the diaphragm. And we don't actually know what causes hiccups.
You do sometimes get them when you eat a piece of bread, it can cause hiccups.
So get up when you're eating.
What you eat and drink can cause hiccups, but we know it's a lot of times the expression. So fear and excitement can also cause hiccups. And that's why I think it's a lot of the time a trigger with the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the nerve that controls the diaphragm, and the spasmodic feeling you get the hiccups. That's why we often advise holding your breath or having cold ice water and breathing into a paper bag often helps hiccups. The thing is, hiccups doesn't actually harm you at all. It's just like an uncomfortable feeling.
Well, it can be unpleasant if you're getting it a lot.
We've all had it.
Can it be hereditary? Because my father suffers with hiccups and I have them really badly. And when I was pregnant with my son
Really?
had hiccups the whole way through my pregnancy. And I actually
Really?
thought, my stomach would be convulsing whilst I was presenting Breakfast News because he was having hiccups. Yeah, it's quite common.
There's no hereditary component we know.
Just
that
my
causes
weird
hiccups.
family.
Yeah, it could be your family. There's no hereditary component we know that causes hiccups. But what we know is hiccups often goes away by itself. However, there are a number of things you can do to get rid of it. It's very unlikely that it's going to be caused by the same thing often and often at the same time. But if it is, then I would say possibly see the GP, because there might be a number of things that can cause hiccups that can cause other things.
Such
so if
as?
it's hiccups isolation, then fair enough. But if it's hiccups and you get other things, then I'd say probably see the GP.
Okay.
All right, Randall, there's one for you. You might have to go and see the GP.
You might have to, Randall. Depends what else you got.
Right, well, Sarah has got in touch. She says, I'm trying to manage my diet like so many at this time of year, so I have plenty of time to get in shape for summer. Does the specific food I eat directly impact on my weight, and how many calories should I eat per day?
Of course. Like, anything you eat is going to impact on your calories and what you eat. And it obviously depends on how many calories you're expending during your exercise and what you do during the day. If you're a very energetic person and you're doing a lot and you're very active, then you're going to need to eat more. So for me, I'm a bigger person. I often exercise a lot during the day. I need a lot of calories just to fuel me, generally. She's probably going to need, obviously, a lot less. But it kind of depends on, one, what she's doing, two, exactly where she's getting her calories from. Because me, I try to get my calories, obviously, from, fruit and veg and healthy foods. However, you can get your calories from, obviously, not so healthy stuff. And that impact is going to have a general tone on what she presents with later on in terms of, like, how big she gets, and then later cardiovascular disease.
All those risks.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose if you're trying to lose weight, the aim is not to eat more if you're exercising more. It's probably you want to exercise more, eat less.
It's the basics. It's calorific deficit. So you're going to want to lose more than you're taking in. That's what's going to lose your weight in a sense.
Get on one of these schemes. You can do them online.
Which schemes?
Well, I don't want to say because it's like too much plugging, isn't it? You've got to be careful.
Okay.
But I've just been on a.
Give us an example of not necessarily the one you did.
Well, you don't need to tell us the whole scheme.
So Slimming World or Weight Watchers or something of those, which can be very effective. One of those.
They can be, but I do warn people about diet fads, especially because
a lot
of
fad, though, is it?
No, but a lot of people get in these schemes, and the thing is, schemes often you have them for a certain limit time. When you finish these schemes, what happens?
Oh, you get a whole booklet how to continue because it's very.
Yeah.
I've never.
The continuation is the key. The continuation is the key. It's small changes due to lifestyle changes. That's what eventually is going to lose your weight.
Yeah.
I like this one from Danny. I'm at uni. I want to be able to enjoy time out as restrictions ease because so many of people's universities experience, haven't they? They've been curtailed.
Yeah.
But he says, I'm also coming up to exam season, the dreaded exams. How long does alcohol stay in your system and will it impact me maybe 2 days later?
It can. In terms of your physical, exam performance, unlikely, but alcohol can stay in your system one drink per hour. Usually, but alcohol can stay in your system in terms of, we can detect it from your hair.
What?
We can detect it from your hair 3-4 days after. Genuinely.
Come here.
Stop it.
If the police would detect alcohol in your system, they can detect it from your hair literally 3-4 days after. Yeah. Alcohol can stay in your system for a while, and it depends obviously on...
Well, at uni, people tend to go for it, don't they? So if you're drinking vast volumes, you'd imagine maybe 2 days is possible.
Yeah, but when you think about it, when you think about it at uni, you're thinking about how it's going to affect your academic performance. Normally, after a day or two, you're going to be fine. What we can detect in alcohol in a criminal sense.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you've been driving under influence or whatnot, we can detect alcohol literally 3-4 days after. We can still tell when you had a drink.
Did you drink a lot at uni? Because obviously, I know you played 4 sports at a high level, and you were doing medicine, and you're very healthy. So did that just mean you didn't include alcohol, or did you have a bit of fun?
Oh no, I'm not gonna lie, I did.
Yeah, well, it's good to be honest.
I did, but the thing is, I did it in a way that I could control it. So obviously, when I knew exam season was coming up, a lot of us medics we had to...
To be fair, medics are the worst.
Yeah. Medics are the worst. Medics are always the worst. A lot of us medics, we had to know, okay, when play hard, work hard. So it was a case where, all right, exams coming up, we need to calm down a week or two before, get in the library, cram, do what we need to do, work together, etc., etc. But like, if you're revising, such as he might be doing, if you're revising such as he might be doing, I'd suggest at least a week before.
Right.
Stop drinking.
Alcohol.
You see, I don't know if I'm impressed by you, Danny, or slightly disappointed that you're even thinking about this. I don't think I thought about my alcohol intake and exams.
No, I don't think I did, but
you have to
world's changed.
No, you have to understand. A lot of people get stressed when exam season comes, and they're thinking about alcohol even more. Alcohol is just going to make you worse.
I remember doing my GCSE, well, a few years ago now, but doing my GCSE revision down the pub.
Stop it.
And
I lived in a little village, you could just do it. So I used to have a pint of mild and a Hamlet.
I don't think I'd been in a pub when I was...
I'm not even sure what that is. But
a Hamlet?
What?
No.
What?
Oh.
You had a cigar?
I used to sit down with
For your
Tony, who was the
GCSEs?
landlord.
That's illegal.
That's 15. I used to, it was fun.
But you need to know the impact that alcohol could have on your thinking. Obviously, it slows your thinking, it slows your brain fog down, and so you're not going to be able to revise to the maximum capacity you want to.
Yeah.
If you want to achieve the best exam results, obviously you're going to have to start drinking at least a week before you take your exam.
Okay, good advice. Zal says, I've just started a yoga class to get on with health and fitness, but my friends say I can't tone my body without weight training. Do I really need to lift weights? Isn't yoga enough?
No, so weight training helps a lot. Weight training
helps with what?
Toning.
Oh, sorry.
A lot of people, especially women, think weight training is going to make them too buff, going to be too big. Not the case. It's often very, very good for toning.
No need to show off.
No, but for example, I would always avoid the weights.
Why?
Well, because, I don't want to get any bigger. It's exactly
Can you see what I mean? Can you see what I mean? No. That is a medical myth. It's a medical myth. I actually put it in my book. It's a medical myth where a lot of people think weight training makes you bigger. Weight training can, one, affect your cardiovascular level. It can affect you a lot in terms of just your general cardiovascular output. It helps a lot. Two, toning. Weight training is very, very, very good for toning, for men and women. It doesn't often buff you up. Weight training only buffs you up when you're lifting a significant amount of weight to break the striae in the muscles and make them form bigger. So stuff like that I will want to do, if I want to lift heavy weight because I'm trying to get buff, that's going to do that. But if you, depending on the weight you lift, if you just want to tone,
so you don't have to do. You can get toning from quite a little weight.
Yes.
Oh, I'm all
yes,
for that,
you can. Yoga helps a lot.
Yeah.
But yoga is generally just going to affect your flexibility.
I think being a mum is great for toning because I'm constantly lifting kids up.
Yeah.
It's like
that
25
shoulders,
kilo
biceps.
kid here.
Yeah.
Oh,
why not? But yeah, I would advise to incorporate even a little bit of weight training into your yoga, or after or before your yoga, if you want to tone. But it depends on your goals.
Yeah.
If you want to look more toned, I would definitely incorporate weight training. If you just want to improve your flexibility, yoga should be enough.
See, thankfully, I've naturally got the body of a god, so I don't need to...
You don't need to do
How's
it.
the hot chocolate going down?
Necking it down.
To be fair, I think my blood's...
done the trick?
They're starting to rise a little bit.
Well, hopefully the doctor will be lingering. Oh, you're still crashing.
Oh, hey,
you're getting there.
You're getting hypo, man.
Yeah.
We need to get you some fruit. We need to get you some fruit.
Some fruit. It goes for the hard stuff. Dr. Mecca, lovely to have you in. Thank you so much. You've sort of got us all inspired this morning. Look, while we're talking about our health, let's once again speak to fitness guru Delvin Clark, who this time is with his daughter and has some exercises for us. Delvin, does that mean you're going to do some demos?
Yes, indeed. Some really easy, basic aerobics that anyone can do at home, either in the front room or in the garage or even the bathroom. I'm here with my lovely daughter, Olivia. Say hello.
Hi, Brian. Hope you're ready to move.
Okay, then we're going to have to do a really easy, basic aerobic warm-up. Let's go. March it out. Brilliant, okay? We're going to start off very easy with an easy walk. Keep marching. Get that beat coming in a minute. Okay? Breathing, arms up. And out. One more time, up. Let's start with an easy walk here. Here we go. And again, now 2 steps this way, 2 steps. Step and step. Now 4 knee repeater. 4, 3, 2, and march. Do the same again on the other side. Here we go. Easy walk. And again, 2 steps this way. Here we go. Wave that arm. Now 4 knee repeater here. 4, 3, 2, and march. Let's do the same thing again. Ready? Easy walk now. Here we go. Forward and back. 2 steps this way. 2 steps. Raise that arm up. 4 knee repeater. 4. So we're going to use our arms and love ourselves. Here we go. Out, in. Easy walk. Nice. Here. 2 steps. 2 steps. 4 knee repeater. Raise it up. 4, 3.
Oh, we're doing the legs.
Out, in, love yourself. Last time.
Love yourself.
You can do it, you can do it.
I'm out of breath. I don't know about you. Oh,
4 knee repeater. You're getting really warm now. Love yourself now with those arms. Easy walk. 1 more. 2 steps here. Arm up. 4 knee repeater. 4, 3. Now love yourselves. You have to love yourself. Here we go again. Easy walk. 2 steps now. You should know the routine by now. 4 knee repeater. 4, 3. Love yourselves. For the very last time, from the top, easy walk. Here we go.
It's getting hot in here. Dalvin, we're going to let you take that to the break. We're going to have a little chill over here. We've got our sweat on, and we'll see you at home in a few moments. First of all, here's your Monday forecast.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good
morning to you.
We're a bit overexcited after our little workout there.
It's because we're slightly premature, you see.
We are. It's just before 9 o'clock on
15
Monday,
seconds to go.
the 21st of February. This is Breakfast on GB News, not with Eamonn today. It's with Stephen and Isabel.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you reminded me. We are live across the whole of the UK on your TV, on your radio, and online. Coming up for you.
Boris Johnson will lay out his plan for living with COVID later today. The PM is expected to tell the country that vaccination, testing and antiviral treatments will be relied upon to keep the country safe instead of social restrictions.
It comes as the Queen tests positive for coronavirus. The palace insists she just has mild, cold-like symptoms and will carry on with light duties.
And a third named storm hits the UK. Storm Franklin brings more power cuts and travel disruptions, with flooding prompting evacuations in parts of the UK.
Also today, we're celebrating the life of Jamal Edwards as tributes pour in for the young music mogul who helped launch the careers of Jessie J, Dave and Ed Sheeran.
And of course, you can always join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So there is some concern, understandably so, about Her Majesty the Queen this morning. After it was announced yesterday, of course, that she has COVID-19, and after all of the sort of bubbles that the royal family has been in, this is the first. So the Prince of Wales has recently had COVID, and Camilla, they've had it before. Her Majesty hasn't, but she has now got COVID-19. But the palace saying, well, you know, it's pretty mild and she's able to carry on light duties still.
Typically stoic. Look, the announcement comes weeks after the Queen became the UK's longest reigning monarch, reaching her platinum jubilee of 70 years. Let's bring in Ellie Costello. She joins us from Windsor Castle this morning. Look, we know that Her Majesty the Queen is taking this virus remarkably well. It's been a mild form of it and she's being able to work. Are you able to give us any more info on how she's doing?
Good morning, Stephen and Isabel. Yes, I'm outside Windsor Castle, where we know the Queen is inside those castle walls. She is recovering from coronavirus and is still undertaking light duties. She is stoic, our Queen. She is very hardworking and she is sticking to business as usual. We do know, I have heard from sources this morning, that the Queen was watching her racehorse at the Newbury races yesterday. She was watching it on the television from Windsor Castle. So that gives us some hope, some indication that she is well enough to sit up and watch television. We also saw a social media message from the Queen to Team GB curling team, who won gold at the Olympics yesterday. So that's just some kind of sense of the light duties that Her Majesty will be taking part in this week. She will be doing social media messages. She'll be meeting ambassadors via video link, which we know she has been doing this week. And we often see her pictured with her red briefcase where she signs laws. So that's also something that she might be doing this week as well. But this will come as a huge shock to many people, that statement from Buckingham Palace yesterday. Obviously, great concern for a 95-year-old woman, almost 96-year-old woman, who had very poor health before Christmas. But the palace did release this statement yesterday. Let's have a little look at it now. It says that the Queen is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. It continues, and it says that she will receive medical attention and will follow all of the appropriate guidelines. And Isabel and Stephen, great efforts have gone into keeping the Queen safe during this pandemic. Stephen, as you just said, we're 2 years into this pandemic, and this is the first time that the Queen has tested positive. But she has been very careful. She cancelled that Christmas lunch, you'll remember. She has that picture of her at her husband's funeral where she sat by herself. That's what the law demanded at the time that people do. That became an image of the pandemic, that self-sacrifice to keep yourself safe. And the Queen has spent much of the past 2 years at Windsor Castle in HMS Bubble. That is the nickname that the small group, the small household of just 20 people that have been surrounding the Queen for the past 2 years. But royal sources tell me that the Queen knew that she was going to test positive for coronavirus at one point, and many people in that HMS Bubble have tested positive this week. Prince Charles tested positive on the 10th of February, and only 2 days prior to that he had met his mother, the Queen. And we do know as well that his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, has also tested positive. She She too is still in self-isolation. But that statement from the palace, that rare statement from the palace with an update on the Queen's health, is there to show that not only do we know about the Queen's health, but also to ease any sense of panic. They want us to know that she's in the best possible place, she's receiving the best possible care, and they are very much looking forward to the Jubilee celebrations, the official Jubilee celebrations in June.
OK, Ellie Costello, thank you. Let's talk to royal and entertainment reporter at the Sunday Mirror, Sarah Robertson. Good to see you this morning. I mean, what a lot of people are saluting and really applauding with Her Majesty is this just let's get on with it approach.
Yes, that's what the Queen is famed for, that sense of duty that she has and that stoicism that she also carries with her. And for the Queen, it is, you know, she's experiencing minor cold symptoms, as we've heard. She's carrying out light duties still, which means reading documents, signing off on forms and official letters and papers. She's got her dogs. She's got a fantastic team of medical staff around her. She really does have access to the best possible care. But for the Queen, you know, she will just be doing her best to show the nation that she's trying to carry on as much as she's able to, while being safely at home, taken care of. But duty always comes first with the Queen.
It is a reminder of how, well, precious, I suppose, the Queen is. I mean, not only has she lost her husband this year, she herself was admitted to hospital, wasn't she, in October. She didn't perform any public engagements for several months, isolating in HMS Bubble for a large part of the pandemic, looking perhaps more frail than we're used to seeing her. Look, as you say, she's doing well, but at the age of 95, it is... Well, it's always a worry, isn't it?
Of course. And when the news came through from Buckingham Palace yesterday, I was one of those people that went, you know, we can't have anything happen to the Queen. You know, we want to wrap her up in cotton wool and keep her with us forever, of course. And she is 95. She's going to turn 96 in April. She's not as strong or as sprightly as she was, but compared to many other 95-year-olds, she is remarkable. She has fantastic good health. I mean, she's always had the best care. She's had a brilliant diet. She's always exercised, looked after her health. She isn't your typical 95-year-old, but still, one does have to be sensible. We do have to think, you know, is this time for her to scale back a little bit, which is what she has been doing. How many other 95-year-olds do we know that's carried out the workload that the Queen has in recent years, and having gone through such a tumultuous time in her private life with her children and
You see, when we say
various escapades.
When we say light duties, and it may only be sort of reading through documents and what have you, but even so, I mean, she's not laid up in bed 24 hours a day, is she?
No, this is it. I mean, I imagine the Racing Post will still be top of the pile for Her Majesty the Queen. That will be the first thing she'll look at, what's going on with the horses in the world of racing. But yes, you know, it's a lot. You're having to concentrate. You know, you're being sent all these documents by various ministers, meetings scheduled in, obviously, with the Prime Minister. And the Queen takes an active interest in current affairs. She likes to be abroad all subjects and know what she's talking about. She does like to be kept informed, but still it requires concentration and effort and energy. And I think, you know, well, I'd like to think that she is trying to rest where she can as much as possible.
We heard from one royal source, I think Ellie was telling us that Her Majesty was watching the racing yesterday from Newbury, and that just makes you feel reassured, doesn't it? But I mean, look, lots of the papers covering it in different ways, some not even covering it at all on their front page. But I think that's a sign, isn't it, that this isn't as serious as it could have been. And as Stephen was saying earlier, you know, if it was really serious, we probably wouldn't be told.
No.
And I think the key was when the line about how senior members of the royal family will continue with their duties. I think the Duchess of Cambridge is off to Denmark this week, and that's to continue.
Yes, so the Queen, you know, always leads by example, doesn't she? And she's setting that example that, yes, OK, this is a bit of a setback, but for the rest of the family, as much as possible, business carries on as normal. The firm rolls on, and that's always been the example that she set, and to all her subjects, you know, in the kingdom. That's how she acts.
Isn't it remarkable that at a time of national crisis, which we have had, I mean, we have really hung on her every word when she's given, an address, whether it's the Christmas speech or other times she's addressed the nation. She really has led from the front, hasn't she?
Always. She's an absolute stalwart for this country and around the world, and it's why she's just so respected and revered by most people. Even, I think, anti-Republican, shall we say, they still have this kind of begrudging admiralty for the Queen, admiration, shall I say, for the Queen. They do look on her and say, well, yes, she has been incredible in how she's led, this country as Her Majesty.
Oh, remarkable.
Yeah,
Love
we
her.
just wish her well.
We do.
But I think she'll be back. I know that there's no engagement scheduled in her diary for the next 4 weeks.
Right.
So there weren't any public engagements scheduled there. And I tried to speak to Buckingham Palace just before coming on air, but they weren't available to give an updated comment, I'm afraid.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me.
But I think we take from that, no news is good news, and we should see her soon. Thank you.
Sarah Robertson, thank you. Yeah, from the Sunday Mirror. It's so reassuring, actually, I think, to know that she may be a bit under the weather, but she's doing okay.
The nation's grandma, really, isn't she? We all hold her in such affection, and actually, well, for both of our lifetimes, she's been on the throne, and we can't imagine it any other way.
No, it's going to be odd when we do end up with a king.
OK, let's take a look at the rest of the morning's headlines. 11 minutes past 9. The Prime Minister says scrapping the requirement to self-isolate in England will bring the country towards a return to normality and finally give people back their freedom. Boris Johnson will meet with his cabinet this morning before updating MPs on his Living with COVID blueprint. However, some health experts have been critical of the idea of lifting the legal requirement to quarantine after a positive result.
Union leaders have hit out at possible government plans to charge for COVID tests. They call it an act of madness during a cost of living crisis. The TUC says it will disproportionately hit frontline and low-paid workers and is urging the Prime Minister to put public health ahead of internal party politics. The Business Minister, Paul Scully, says the £2 billion spent every month on coronavirus tests could be better used elsewhere.
Train operators have warned passengers to stay at home if possible, as Storm Franklin is expected to bring major disruption. Yellow weather warnings are in place for England and the east of Scotland, and the Met Office has issued an amber warning for Northern Ireland. Environment agencies have also issued hundreds of alerts for flooding across the UK.
President Biden has agreed in principle to have talks with President Putin as long as Russia holds off any invasion of Ukraine. The coming week is going to be crucial for democracy, according to the Prime Minister. That's after he spoke to the French President Emmanuel Macron about the growing tensions. There are concerns, though, over increased shelling in the region and Russia extending military drills in Belarus.
Australia has welcomed tourists back today after nearly 2 years. Vaccinated travellers have been greeted at Sydney's airport after some of the world's strictest pandemic measures were lifted. Some Australians were allowed to return last year, but most international tourists have had to wait.
Loads of you getting in touch this morning, and I love the fact that we get views from all sides. That's really important that everyone gets their voice heard. On the coronavirus removal of restrictions, Jill says, is Boris mad? COVID killed thousands of elderly before the vaccines. It's too much of a risk. However, Morris says, I'm no fan of Boris, but he's right about this.
Andy says, whatever Boris does, he can't win or please everyone. Just let him do his job. On the storm, Elaine says it's much worse here in Cheshire than Storm Dudley or Eunice. Much worse at present and hoping it'll ease soon. And Michael saying something similar. Storm Franklin appears to be worse than Eunice here in Manchester. We've had strong winds since yesterday evening. It woke me up during the night. Also, there wasn't much rain with Eunice. Seems to be a common theme.
A lot of rain. On healthy eating, we talk about healthy eating, whether it does actually help with cardiovascular issues. Rachel says, I feel very sorry for those children who are going to be forced to eat veg in schools. Vegetarian food, I think she means there. These people who put awful restrictions on our children should all be cancelled and sacked. Have to say, I mean, I've been a vegetarian for 40...
I forget you're a veggie.
43 years I've been vegetarian, a strict vegetarian. But I wouldn't force kids to be vegetarian.
Yeah, no.
Why should they?
Just the phrase forcing kids, it's just a little bit crazy. And just on our little fitness ditty before the break, Francis Alderson says that was the funniest thing I've seen on TV for a week. Stephen and Isabel trying to coordinate their workout. I became exhausted just watching them. And just remember, if you were listening on the radio to what probably wasn't a very radio-friendly segment, you can watch it back on our app. And this one from Daniel Hodge. You've made me laugh, Isabel and Stephen, cutting your fitness shapes, and with a laughing emoji. Lots of emails saying the same.
Just because Dr. Mecca was talking about, we had someone complaining about hiccups. Bridget says if you have hiccups, a sip of vinegar cures them. Worth a try. Brian says try a spoonful of peanut butter. Sounds a bit nicer. Give it, if that works, try it. If that works, if you've got hiccups this morning, let us know.
Yeah.
I'd try that.
Yeah, you'd try anything once. Oh, I mean, anyway.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
Oh, right, let's move on to more serious matters. We've been reporting all day about Storm Franklin, and I think it's an amber warning in place for Northern Ireland. Our reporter, Dougie Beattie, has been out and about in Donaghadee this morning. I hope I've got that right. I'm so sorry. How's things going? It looks very, very windy where you are.
Yes, and your pronunciation wasn't bad. It is Donaghadee. This is where most of the Ulster Scots settlers arrived back in the 1600s. They rode to Scotland to church every Sunday. You wouldn't be doing that today. Winds of about 80 miles an hour now battering us here. It is there's 4,000 homes without power, and this storm is definitely worse than the past two that hit us. Tyrone, Derry and Fermanagh have took the worst of it. There's about 300 incidents of flooding and trees down. The DOE are reporting, the road service. And pubs are having to be used in Omagh in order to keep the rivers from bursting banks and flooding. Now, the in round Malin Head and right down in towards Sligo, apparently it's about 184 kilometres is the wind speeds that's being recorded. So we are in for quite a bad day in Northern Ireland, but the west of the province getting the worst of it.
Oh, Dougie, you just take care there. At least you've not got much hair to blow about. Yeah. Look on the positive side.
Grain, quickly.
I know that feeling. Let's check in with our East of England reporter, Amelia Harper, who's in Hertfordshire, in Hitchin, I think, still.
Crikey, there's so much... Sorry, Dougie in Donaghadee, and we've got Amelia Harper in Hitchin and Hertfordshire. Lots of alliteration going on.
This is why we get paid the small bucks. What's happening there, Amelia?
Well, it's very, very windy and very gusty and pretty cold at the moment because England is right in the middle until about 1 p.m. Today. In the middle of that yellow Met Office warning. They're warning we could see further power cuts. We could see transport delays and more damage to buildings, unfortunately, as well. Now, this is the third named storm in a week. We had Dudley, Eunice and now Storm Franklin. But actually, it's not too bad here in the south of England compared to actually further up in the north. The Environment Agency is urging, in a quote, extreme care because they are seeing rivers rising, levels rising there. Some 400 homes, not all of them yet, but are being evacuated ahead of potential flooding in places like around Didsbury. But also here in the rest of England, we've got 55,000 people still without power. This is completely hampering the efforts, the clean-up efforts as a result of Storm Eunice as well. 1.3 million people, we heard from the business secretary this morning, were without power, and as of today as well, still bad news for transport. 23 train operators around the UK are still being affected.
Okay, Amelia, thank you.
Oh, it's just not nice to head out.
It's never ending.
If you don't have to head out today, don't bother. Unfortunately, a lot of us do.
Coming up, we're going to be talking about something a little bit more cheerful. Besides all these storms, we're talking about the entertainment news. We've got the journalist Ellie Phillips here with all the gossip. That's in a few moments. We'll see you after this quick break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 29 minutes past 9. You're watching and listening to Breakfast.
21 minutes past 9.
What did I say?
29.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be off
Sorry.
air at that point. I was going to say, this is going to be a short segment.
Trying to read a number and there's too many things going on. It's 21 minutes past 9 and we are live across the UK on both your TV and on your radio.
We'd only have Ellie on for about 2 seconds. Let's talk to entertainment journalist Ellie Phillips. Good to see you this morning. Look, it's nice to have a bit of a smile because actually you're kicking off with some really sad news.
Really sad news this morning. Jamal Edwards has died, aged 31. He died on Sunday morning. He's best known as being the founder as SBTV, this incredible platform that was based on YouTube in its early days that gave up-and-coming artists and unknown artists a place to be seen. He had about 1 million followers, which back in the day was huge numbers. Now it seems like, oh, OK, that's, you know, you can get that. But also he didn't use it as a platform for himself. He wasn't wanting to be a YouTuber or an influencer. He used it to give artists a place to be heard. So, yeah, really sad.
And Ellie, he was the son of the loose women's star Brenda Edwards and just 31 years old. So despite his huge success, very young age.
Really young age. So his manager confirmed that he died on Sunday morning. And his mum, Brenda, has since released a statement. She said, "It's with deepest heartbreak that I confirm that my beautiful son, Jamal Edwards, passed away yesterday morning after a sudden illness." So that's what they're saying has happened. And she finished off in her statement saying, "Our love for him lives on, his legacy lives on." And he really did leave a legacy. I mean, he was awarded an MBE in 2014.
Wow.
He started up SBTV when he was just 15 years old, which is incredible. And he founded a charity called JE Delve, which provided youth clubs and help for young people growing up in West London. And yeah, he was just an incredible person. He did so much for so many others, which I think is a big thing about him that people really honour and respect. And yeah, he didn't want the limelight. He wanted it for music that wasn't heard.
Oh, yeah, you don't get that very... Well, not that we don't know of many people who do that. Can we have a look at Spencer, this biopic, however you want to say it, about Princess Diana, and Kristen Stewart's come under fire.
Yes, so there's an eating disorders, the biggest eating disorder charity in the UK called Beat, and they've come out and basically slammed her, saying that, you know, the way that she portrayed bulimia, which Princess Diana had, was irresponsible, and that the filmmakers themselves, they've accused the filmmakers of glamorising eating disorders in general. And one statement from Martha Williams, she spoke to The Mirror, and she's a clinical advice coordinator at Beat. She said some aspects of the film we felt seemed to glamorise the eating disorder. At one point, there is an image of Diana wearing a ball gown and slouching over the toilet, which does appear in the film. It is very graphic. You know, Kristen, she's been shortlisted for an Oscar for this, so she obviously, you know, did go to these extremes. But these comments from the eating disorder charity come off the back of an interview that Kristen did with Variety. She explained how she got into character and how she learnt more about bulimia. And she said, "I couldn't throw up in this movie, even when I really should have. I felt like rubbish that I couldn't get it up. I know it was because my body was just like, the idea was so untouchable. So she basically said that she was trying to force herself to do this. And people are kind of like, well, it's acting. You don't need to actually do it. You know, do you have to go to those extremes? Do you have to talk about it in that way? Because it is, you know, a really touchy subject. But to be honest, in my opinion, when they say glamorising eating disorders because someone's in a ball gown throwing up, I actually think it does the opposite. I think it rips down this image of this, you know...
It's never been done before, apart from, I think, in The Crown.
Yeah.
Princess Diana's story has been the first time, we've seen it in The Crown, as I say, and in Spencer in this biopic, that actually these things are being depicted at all. I mean, when we were growing up, you would never see scenes of eating disorders. It's boundary pushing, and I suppose it's bound to be quite shocking.
Yes, I think that's the thing. It's shocking, and some people are saying, oh, I'm not comfortable with it. Others are saying, is it the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it? And I think it's only by doing them that you kind of learn and grow, the film industry in general, and also the eating disorder charities to come in and say, OK, this is where our line is drawn.
Yeah. Oh, it's all a bit uncomfortable, isn't it? Look, Ellie, it's good to talk to you this one. We are out of time.
We always are, aren't we? We could talk for ages.
Oh, you have a job to squeeze a word in. I've struggled all morning.
Here we go.
Struggled. I'll try better tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, Ellie, thank you very much. That's it from Stephen and me. We'll be back again tomorrow at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Up next...
It's Tom Harwood with the briefing. First, though, here's your weather forecast. So the UK is looking gradually calmer as Storm Franklin moves away, allowing the winds to ease. Let's have a look at the details for you. And bright across southwest England by lunchtime, but still very windy with gales over the hills around the coast as well. The odd shower is possible, temperatures climbing into double figures.
Showers will still be a little more frequent across southeast England and the London area, but gusty winds here will make it feel colder than the numbers suggest.
Our gales around the coast and over the higher ground of Wales will slowly ease as well. Some sunshine developing, but perhaps the odd sharp shower too.
It's a mixed morning for the Midlands with sunny spells and a few showers. Very windy here as Storm Franklin clears through. Temperatures climbing to around 10 Celsius by midday.
Got plenty of sunny spells for northern England, but the wind's still strong in the west. A few showers possible, but most places will stay dry. Temperatures generally staying in single figures.
Scattered showers will continue across Scotland, falling as snow over the higher ground. Winds easing from the north and west, but still blustery in the east. Highs of 8 degrees in Edinburgh.
And Northern Ireland will also be largely dry with some sunny spells across the province, but those gusty winds are continuing. Not as strong as they have been overnight. That's the good news. The highs there of 10 Celsius.
And then it will be largely dry throughout the rest of the day across the UK, but rain moving back into the far west by evening. That's how your weather's shaping up this Monday morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan